Blake. Carberry Montgomery.
It's not here yet, sorry.
Kroll.
Here.
McBurney.
Here.
Obrecht.
All right, thank you. We'll, that's with what we normally do, but we are short up. Ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Bernie, second by Obrecht, discussion, roll call.
McBurney. Yes. Obrecht.
Yes.
Blake.
Yes.
Kroll.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, AJ, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, whoops, thank you. Nikki's going to knock the table off. Good morning and welcome. No better way to spend a Saturday morning when it's snowing, and so thank you for joining us. This is your annual budget review process that begins today. We have the agenda that outlines all the departments that will be here today as we go through the document. Then we have Monday afternoon at 5:30 as needed for additional discussion, and then finalization of the document. So then Nikki and the finance crew can begin their process of filing with the county, doing all the conversion from our budget documents to the state document, and getting ourselves squared away by the end of March, which is the mandatory filing date to get our levy to the county. As we go through, and just this is, all of you have been through this before, so I'll try to be brief in my introductory comments. You know, the outline of the agenda, we're going to go through all the general fund activities this morning for the most part. And then again, department heads and their support staff will be filtering in throughout the day. We get to that segment of the budget, I will introduce the director. They will introduce any of their support team that came with them. And then they'll give a presentation of their document. You'll have an opportunity, pardon me, to ask questions, and then we will proceed. As we go forward, as you look at the document, if you've had a chance to review it in advance, you have any notes that you want to talk about, if there's any questions that arise, and then after we go through the process, then there will be that final kind of reconciliation, if you will, that the council then makes a determination as we go back through the budgets as any changes or alterations you want to make. There was a suggestion by Councilmember Obrecht that you could all just adopt it right now and we could walk out the door. We'll give you your helping of bananas and oranges and send you on your way. So I know that's not the case, but because there's been an awful lot of hard work, and I want to first recognize all the directors and their staff for the work that they do. This process begins, and really it probably begins for next fiscal year, it probably begins the day after you adopt the budget, because they look at things that maybe weren't approved in the budget or weren't recommended, and they were going to be put off till next year in our process. And I'll give you just an insight. You know, the directors and their staff put together a budget. It's reviewed by myself and Nikki. Final decisions are made based on our evaluations, the money we have available, any other issue that may rise an issue to the top. Of course, we take care of personnel issues and et cetera. But, you know, requests for people, requests for different types of equipment, those things are reviewed, questions asked, and then it's submitted for your consideration, of course. Some of those you make alterations, some you don't. But as I said, the process then really will begin very shortly after this, where directors will look at what their budget is, what their needs may be, what opportunities lie ahead in the next fiscal year. So with that, I just go over a quick couple of housekeeping issues for you real quick. We will start this morning. You all know where the restrooms are, so if you have a need for a break, you get up and get it going. We'll try to have some breaks periodically so you can get up, stand, do exercises, whatever you want to do, stretch out. We have snacks over here. We have coffee, water, and pop that's not here. We have it in the break room, so you can help yourself there. If you have any questions that come up, again, this is formal but informal. We have a process set forward, but we want you to be comfortable throughout the day. We'll go toward the end of the day, and depending upon where you are in the process, you may want to take a little extra time if it gets you to the end of the journey. If not, if there's a point where you say, we've had enough, the numbers are blurring together and we're tired, we'll call it a day. And then we'll convene again on Monday. Just another quick reminder, put your cell phones on silent, please. That way we don't have any distractions. Okay, other than that, let's start. Let's go to your budget book. Let's go under the overview section. Just real quickly, this again, just kind of a reminder, between Nikki and I, we'll hand things off. So I'll do the introduction, she'll go through some financial material, and then we'll go into the directors, the actual department's budgets. So just as you know, we'll flip and flop back and forth.
Just for the record too, I do need to leave for a couple hours for talk with officials, so I'll just duck out and we'll go after 10 to get over there in time, and then Mayor Pro Tem's in charge for a couple hours, so don't screw it up, Matt.
Was me to all of you.
Okay. All right.
Just a note too, I have a couple of phone calls that I may need to actually take, so I am gonna leave it.
If you need to take care of things, that's what it's for. This is informal, but
Yeah.
just come and go as you need to, but.
Yep, as I said, this is a formal but informal process, but again, we'll make it as comfortable as possible. So, all right, if you turn to the overview section of your budget, again, this format has not changed any, in as much as it is an overview of what our recommendations are as far as the setting the levy number, and the description that we have there. So, you know, we are not making any changes in the proposed levy for the next fiscal year. So that'll be at $10.01. And if you look on the first page in the second paragraph, it outlines it in there, and by each one of the different categories in which we levy. Your previous action by adopting the capital improvement plan, the CIP, helped set that levy. So that was the first of these series of levies that you will be considering. And as I mentioned, we have until the end of March to file with the county what our levy will be for the next fiscal year. When we looked at the majority of our cost, as you'll see as we go through this process, are personnel. That's what cities are. We are a service organization, and it takes people to do the service that we provide. And so the majority of our budget is going to be, and majority of all the directors' budgets will be personnel-related cost. As we go through each of the directors' requests, we look at things such as their request for additional personnel. And some of that is gauged on, you know, maybe we've gotten a grant, maybe we're going to partner with someone, maybe we have direction from the council previously that we want to incrementally increase the staffing within a particular department. Those will be included here, and that will be outlined as we get further into the document. One of the things that we also talk about is the various financial related issues, and of course, Nikki will go over those in a few minutes, but they're outlined here in the document as well, because we look at the levy, we look at the lost, we look at all sorts of different revenue that we incorporate within the budget itself that, again, may be unique to a particular department. For example, we'll talk later about the road use tax dollars that come in. Those are dollars that we get from the state gasoline tax, our share of that, and that helps to fund a majority of the activity within the public works activity. So again, you'll look at, as we go through the director's request and for the department notes, that you'll see the funding, where that comes from. And if you have questions about any of the acronyms, I know that you've been through this before, but it could be something may new pop up at you, please let us know. We talked about, when we talk about our debt, and that's again down the first page, is that's one of the things that we're always going to take a look at, and particularly in this environment. You know, one of the things that we mentioned, when I mentioned earlier about the lost funds, is that we had a planned program that we were going to use our lost proceeds to accumulate, buy down existing debt when it became callable, and that way we were working our way incrementally toward ultimately not issuing debt and using the monies from the local option sales tax to fund our CIP document. And that would give us a tax relief on the debt service. Well, within the last 12 to 14 months, interest rates for issuing debt have gone up significantly. And we monitor those. We monitor what other communities and other school districts, anybody who issues public debt, we monitor those. And, you know, we've come to that conclusion, and I think you would agree, that we are not going to retire a 3% debt to borrow at 5%. It just doesn't make sense. So again, for Adam and Bridget, who sat on the CIP committee, we explained that to them, and it just makes common sense. So as we talk about lost, as we get into this a little bit further, just keep that in mind, is that we continually monitor where it is that is our best, its most advantageous position to retire debt, to use cash reserves, whatever it may be, in order for that, so we can keep a steady levy. Because that's one of the things we look at, and I should have mentioned that earlier, is that, at least from my philosophical position, there's an advantage to steady. You don't want to go down too far incrementally, and then you don't want to have to jump right back up. So if you keep a levy rate steady, maybe some alterations that go along, I think that is a much more predictable for the residents and the taxpayers. It also provides for us operationally a steady flow that we can continue to provide the services that I think our residents have gone to appreciate. And again, we kind of temper that a bit, and we haven't had the chance because of COVID and some other things, but our series of last resident surveys that we've done, our ratings are in the 90s. So clearly, we believe that based on the survey of our residents of the services we provide, that they're appreciative of that, and that we get very high ratings throughout all of our organizational activities. So we believe that's a testament to how we've been doing things. And again, I'm appreciative that there are certain factors that will move that needle up and down, but our goal is to remain reasonably steady. If you turn the pages, if you look at the top of the second page, one of the things that drives us, in the majority, our tax revenues. And our tax revenues are the majority of the dollars that we use to operate, particularly in the general fund activity. And so when the valuations of property for all the classifications come out, we get those at probably the mid-December from both Polk and Dallas County. Because we are in two counties, we use a blended rate at the end. And so our numbers that we received from Polk County were about 4%. And I know that you've all heard stories from the Polk County assessor that there's a 20% increase in valuations. And that will probably show up next year in that discussion. So the 4% is what we received from Polk County. And then we received almost a little over 20% for Dallas County. So that gives us a blended rate of, I've lost it now, 8.29%. So that's pretty good. Given our valuation history, that's one of the higher ones we've had in the last 10 years. So again, that's a reflection of I know there's lots of discussion. We heard that from our legislative folks in December. There's lots of discussion about the how the assessment process goes. Whether or not there's going to be action from the legislature to do anything with that is yet to be seen. But this is the process that they've used for a long, long time. And this is what we we depend on this. This is what sets the tone for us. So that gives us a number that we can then incrementally make change in the budget recommendation to fit within those dollars that are being generated. So this is one of our better years, admittedly. So this gives us, and then we look at the rollback, and that comes out in usually early to mid-November. And the rollback is set by the state. And the rollback, just very briefly, is a residential property tax relief mechanism. And it's been in place for as long as I can remember. And that usually varies in the mid-50s. Sometimes it goes up a couple points, sometimes it goes down a couple points. But this year, it is at the 56.49%. Legislative material that I sent you previously last night and that was out before, there is some active discussion going on at the legislature right now. In fact, there's a Senate Bill 1056 that will be discussed on Monday. And there was a mistake made by the Legislative Service Bureau that in calculation of multi-residential tax rate, and in 2012, the legislature made a change in all the tax rates for commercial multi-residential. And the broad definition of multi-residential is essentially anything more than one. It's apartments, it's nursing homes, it's any place that is not a single family resident. So when the changes were made, they made a decision, they made a commercial change from 100%, commercial and industrial from 100% to 90% valuations. And they took multi-residential and they said over the next 7 years, we're gonna ratchet that down to equal whatever the rollback is for residential properties. Well, when they set the rollback for this year that we're working for the next fiscal year, there was some mistake made. I don't know, can't tell you how it was made, but it was from the Legislative Service Bureau. They forgot or failed to incorporate a year, the final year of that ratcheting back for multi-residential. And so that now has come up, and they are considering retroactively changing the rollback rate. And so for us, well, for any taxing entity that relies on the rollback, the rollback number to set their rates, which would be schools, cities, counties, any other taxing entity, that means that we could lose 1.8%. They would take it down to a roughly 54 and some change. So we, of course, don't believe that's fair, and that's from a staff perspective, so I will qualify that. And there's quite a bit of discussion among folks in my field and in Nikki's field and the effect that it will have on communities. And as you can imagine, 948 cities, 330 school districts, 99 counties, you can imagine the impact that it would have by losing that rollback from about almost 2%. So for us, that means roughly a $900,000 alteration in the revenues that we can generate. And so we will keep our eye on it. I plan on going down to the legislative hearing on Monday just to give our 2 cents worth. I've communicated that to our senators. Some of it might be out of our hands, but we've taken that into consideration. Well, that was known to us in the last week and a half. So our budget was essentially done by then. I will tell you that at this point in time, you have a fund balance that can absorb that. So you're in a very good fiscal position. I know of other cities that aren't in as good a fiscal position as we are, and they're going to struggle with that. School districts, counties, whomever. But just wanted to make that known to you because that is something that if the Senate and the House pass the corrective measures that they're talking about making it effective upon signature of the governor. We're asking them to withhold that and apply it for next year. That we're not saying that that this shouldn't be the rate, but it's kind of late in the game for all these taxing entities to be faced with this. So the message that I know that in my circles, and I know in Nikki's circles as well, we're saying, please delay this. You know, it's fair, for all fairness, you should delay this until the next fiscal year. You can set that number. Everybody has a chance to prepare for it. Right now, again, we know of cities that are completely done with their budget process. They're ready to file, if not had their public hearings, and ready to file with their counties. So it's a statewide predicament, and we're hoping that reasonable minds will make the decision to push it out further. But just wanted to make that known to you.
And AJ gave me the information as well, and certainly I'm going to bring that up today when I go over to the chamber forum as well. So.
Yeah, and you know, again, it's if misery loves company, there's a lot of us. So we'll just see how that works out. Again, as you go through the book, I'm not going to go through every page here in the first introductory comment, but they're just our general comments that we make each year. If you go to the page that is entitled Operating Budget, it's the next two over. Sorry, they didn't have any page numbers on these, but.
That's me, sorry.
Okay. So the operating budget, these are significant budgetary factors. Excuse me. We had, right now, this recommended budget shows 253 full-time employees. And the breakdown is almost half and half between public safety and non-public safety. And that's fairly consistent with what we've had over the last several years. Overall, there were 14 positions, new positions requested within this fiscal year we're preparing for. After review of all the positions and where we stood financially, we're making a recommendation that we add 5 new positions, and they're outlined here. Also, we incorporated within the budget document an overall increase across the board for our non-union people of 5%. We'll also be, in this document, we're recommending changes within our deferred compensation program. And one of the things that we look at when we look at compensation and related issues with our employees, and this also affects our union contracts as well, because discussions concerning financial matters are always at the top of the list. But for our non-union that are what we'll highlight here is that the 5%, we looked at the current inflationary rate, and it is down somewhere near the 6.5% now. But when we put the document together, it was hovering around 8%. So we take that into consideration. The additional adjustments or opportunities within the deferred compensation program are also a recognition of our opportunity or our willingness to look at how we can make things attractive for us to not only retain, but to attract new employees. Aaron Freeman, our Director of Human Resources, will talk a little bit later about some of those issues, the challenges we have in that field. But as we talk this through, we wanted to position ourselves to be an employer of choice, if that can be the right word to use, because we know there's lots of competition, particularly for certain jobs, but also to be reasonable in our approach to compensation for our employees with things that everybody's faced with, you know, the price of gasoline, the price of eggs, whatever it might be. And then again, looking at the enhancement of the deferred compensation program to encourage them to take a little bit more in charge of their retirement opportunities as they look in the future. And so those are incorporated within this document itself. Halfway down, you'll see the adjustments that we made in our 3 union contracts. And again, Aaron will go over a little bit more in detail for those, but what we know today, we incorporate into the document itself. We still are participants in the 411 system for retirement for police and fire. That rate is set each year by the state. It has a floor, I think, of 17%, and it can go as high as actuarially whatever that number requires. 411 is for police and fire personnel, and then you have the IPER system for everybody else. And so, for example, on the 411 system, I'm trying to think, you had to have a population of over 8,000, I think, and then your police and fire officers were required to join that. And these are all mandatory, please remember that. So you don't have a choice as an employee to opt in or opt out. And so you have, under the IPER system, you have a variety of classifications, IPERs for teachers, for public works employees. You have a protected class, which is for fire and police personnel in those cities that are under 8,000. I think there's one for Department of Corrections as well. So there's different categories within IPERs. And again, that rate is set, that contribution rate is set by the state as well. And so we incorporate those numbers that we have here, and they are built into the budget as well. So that reflects in our employee benefit levy. As I should have mentioned earlier, when we set our levy, we are at the $8.10 maximum levy, and that gave us an opportunity. We made that change a couple years ago in light of some potential changes at the legislature that would have been detrimental for cities who weren't at the 810 limit. And so we were well below that. I think we were at 717 or somewhere in that neighborhood. And so we made the decision from a staff recommendation to recommend to council, which they agreed, that the legislature may take some action that if you're not at your 810 limit now, you're going to be frozen at 717 or whatever that number may be, and it's going to be detrimental to communities that have been fiscally responsible or had significant growth in their communities. So we made that change, and when we made that change, it made it eligible for us to segregate all of our employee benefit cost into those separate levies. And so again, it just provides us more flexibility on how we deal with the various costs of providing for our residents. The revenue section is just a quick overview. As I mentioned, at the bottom of the page, you see the property tax levy per thousand valuation. As you can see that history there. And up until, well, in the fiscal year 1920, we made that change to go to $8.10. Again, that is a maximum that you can go. There is what they call the special levy, and that is that numerous communities have that now if you've been at 810 and longer. That's the emergency levy, pardon me. I get terminology, I apologize. The emergency levy was designed for those emergency situations that were unplanned for. I can tell you that there are numerous Iowa cities that have had the emergency levy for 20, 30 years. And that's just an additional way that they can raise revenue because their valuations don't provide enough revenue to provide those services, and they are at the mandatory limit of $8.10. If you'll turn over to the graphic pages, again, this is a very good graphic of the revenue sources that we have. And this is for those questions that you may get outside the offices. These are really good pages just to kind of keep in mind that you can share or talk about because it outlines our revenue sources. And as I mentioned, we have 62% of our revenues that come in belong to the category of property tax. And then we break them down by various other funds. Expenditures at the same time is that we break that down by function, and the function requirement is what I mentioned earlier about the state budget requirements. Our budget document is not as it is, can't be submitted as is to the state. It has to go into their form, and it has to go by these functions. So that's the work that Nikki and her staff will complete once this is approved by you. But it gives that breakdown of how our dollars are being spent that are being generated. Debt service is up 20%. Operationally, our largest expense is public safety, followed by public works, and then the general breakdown that you see there. That's all I have under the introductory comments. Again, I want to thank the directors and particularly Nikki and her staff for all the hard work of putting this document together and coordinating all those activities. Again, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of time. And they do an excellent job. And we have, I'd like to think we have a very good process that for this council, previous councils, and future councils can look at to say that when you get done with this budget, you fully understand where the revenue comes from and how we spend those dollars that are available to us to provide services to the residents. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think we're done then. We can go home. Yeah. What's that? Okay.
Active engagement, yeah.
Okay. They may come in about 3 o'clock. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Matt.
I know it's steadily gone down, but the difference between how much taxable valuation between commercial and residential in 1 year is 1% difference.
Multi-residential is now in residential. That's why. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a huge swing hit in that total number because they just took away that category at all. So you can see it on this. I blew it up in giant size because even my eyes are getting sad with the 6-point font on some of those. It's still pretty small, but this is your 10-year recap. So if the far left column is the year we're talking about, you can see it down below. That's where that 7227. The other piece that we implemented a couple years ago is to take into account how much of that is TIF, because TIF is not in that percentage. So if you scroll down pretty close to the bottom there, the commercial and residential split with TIF factored in, because most of our TIF, well, 99% of it is commercial. So we want to add that back in. So the true percentage is still 6732, but it's closer. But there is a significant swing between excluding TIF and including TIF. So I do provide that as well. The other, I guess, just to, if you're done with your piece, just before James gets started with the technology, just to run through the things that were said at your stations. We have already talked about this is just for your information, how that broke down between the two counties. Folks at the top, Dallas in the middle, and then a consolidated total at the bottom. And other just random numbers I'm always asked for is what's our average growth. I do a 5-year and a 10-year growth. Your net change. Debt service valuation is different because debt includes TIF. So that's always why it's kind of a blended rate when we talk about, things like the community center vote. there's a difference between why operations is different. That's on the general levy valuation, and debt service to pay off those bonds includes TIF. So it's a actually different calculation. And then the, what 1 cent equals, that's the very last thing on there that we always talk about is raise a penny, it creates $38,000 this year in new valuation or new property tax revenue. The other things at your station, just to quickly run through those, road use, we'll talk about that when we get to the road use department. Well, the departments that make it up. The one with the light yellow, the fiscal performance goals. So this was updated last night through it. The one thing occurred to me at 5 o'clock this morning of why is that number off? The bottom two in the debt service, we are planning, this document still reflects paying off the fire station debt in '24. That was to be paid with local option sales tax. That was what we intended. I went ahead and put it in, assuming we are going to do it because it's callable in '24. We were not originally planning to do it till '25 to make sure I had enough lost revenue on hand to do that. But now we're not calling and paying off, so I didn't use my money this year, this one that's coming up. So now I actually have the cash to go ahead and call it in the year it's due. And currently, the rates are coming back down. So when I shared with you, I don't even remember when we did that, August-ish, that West Des Moines sold debt and it was over 5%. So we were kind of in, oh my gosh, this no longer makes sense. They are stabilizing, so that's good. So it's still not probably gonna make sense for this spring to call and pay off, but by a year from now, because this would be June of '24, I wanted to go ahead and put it in the budget. If it doesn't make sense, we won't do it then either, but I went ahead and built it in. But I had it in the total, not in the call and payoff, so that's why the percentages down there look really haywire. The correct number in the '24 year for the second to last one is 18.08, and the last one is 16.64. So much more in line, but at 8 o'clock last night, I was not thinking through why was that be off? And I did find it. That's fixed, and I'll reprint those for you. And then the last one is your fund balance. This one did still end up quite small. This is just where your fund balance percentages end up for each of the budgeted funds reflected in this document. So the orange column is the one that you're looking across as to what percentage. This is always something you talk about is what percentage of general funds specifically, but I provide all of them. So at the end of this fiscal year, based on actual results, we should be at 53.3, which is high, but much to the chief's chagrin, that's mostly because we've had a ton of vacancies all year. You know, the police department has seen a ton of that, and the cost savings of not having those positions, even though it's offset by overtime and having to work those officers that we do have differently, it still resulted in a savings. So we added back significantly to fund balance. So this is high, which leads into AJ's comments about the Senate Study Bill 1056. This is why we could absorb it. If they pull this out, we wouldn't have to make mass changes because I'm adding in $1.2 million to fund balance. So that 900 could get eaten up before we even approve this document technically. Depends upon how fast they move. But it does allow us to be able to react to it and not have to have a knee-jerk reaction. And then in the next year though, we're still planning to spend another $1 million down, so it comes down to 45%. So we're in a really good position, but there's also a lot of legislation that could affect what we get to do. Lost could go away. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there that we just don't know, which is true every year. So we're in a good position to be able to deal with some of those things. But this is just for your information as we work through the document. And then I think you all already incorporated the blue pages are replacement pages. So once capitals and debt is the very last thing that I always finish with our bond team, the financial advisors there to get our debt service scheduled out. So these just need to replace the page numbers that they go in is identified on the bottom. Other than that, we'll talk about road use. And then the equipment replacement is the other thing that will affect all of the departments across the city. And we had already, this is the one that AJ sent you the Friday update of, we handed this out at a council meeting, and here's the verbiage behind it. Going full electric was super pricey, and I didn't think we'd probably want to raise the levy to justify moving to that quite yet. So we're taking a baby step and switching to the hybrids and all of the vehicles that make sense to do so. And so those changes, as well as the cost of vehicles, is just crazy high right now. So there's effectively between 10 and 30%, depending on the type of vehicle, just to buy a gas vehicle, gas or diesel. So those have been incorporated. We worked with the fleet supervisor to update all the figures of, this is just what a regular old car or truck or dump truck, whatever we're doing, that's what they cost and starting to accumulate for those. So there was a huge jump anyway. So any department that you see that has an equipment replacement line, that's just higher. It's no new vehicles, it's just existing cost of what they are going to be, as well as those that qualified. If we identified a hybrid option, those are incorporated as well. So that was just kind of an across the board, so each department doesn't have to belabor that one too. It's, yep, it's just high. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Nikki? Any questions? If not, we'll begin the process. If you will turn to page under General Government, under that tab, and just a quick overview of when we go to these various tabs, general government or public safety or parks or recreation, the general summary on top incorporates all those activities within that category. So again, we break them down by personnel services, contractual supply, capital outlay. You will see from actuals from the various fiscal years previously, so it gives you a snapshot of what those categories were and what that total was. So again, just a reminder as you get to that. Our first one that we have is technology, and that you can find on General Government page 15. Our Director of IT, James Breyer, he's here today. James, you have any staff with you?
I do not have any staff.
Okay. They're all remote.
They're all,
Okay.
they're very remote.
All right.
So remote, they're not even watching.
Okay. James, if you would, please.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thanks for having me. If you will turn to GG17, most of my itemized expenses are there. Overall, we had some licensing changes that are honestly going to be opaque from a cost standpoint. We switched over some enterprise licensing now that we're actually large enough to support agreements of that size, but then the yearly increase of all licensing ends up eating up any cost savings you have, so it's pretty much cost neutral. That's pretty much reflected. The bulk of that would be reflected in my Cisco renewals. And that covers like our networking equipment, a lot of our security appliances, a lot of software stuff at the networking level. As far as actual deviations, major deviations from last year, if you'll go down on GG17 under activity notes, under Laserfish down in the L's, that's essentially our document file management system. Every year I've put a little bit more money in there because we're trying to expand the capabilities of it. Historically, we've used it as just document storage, but it has the ability to do electronic forms, reduce your paper footprint, things like that. Police department was actually the first department in the city to migrate to that last year. They actually started doing 2 of their forms. I can't remember which ones, but one of them was the use of force form and whatnot. So after that, HR and payroll are currently working on some implementation for their employee onboarding. So I've put more money into their approximately 30,000 extra so that we can onboard some more departments. That leaves us a little wiggle room for anybody else who wants to use that, or if we want to have an outward-facing component where the city can actually, or where city citizens can actually access documents through a web interface. So I was just preparing for that by entering some new items inside of Laserfish. Other outliers that are not from last year was we've got hardware refresh. Windows 10 is going to be sunset in 2025. So we have to start, basically you can kind of flip a coin if Microsoft's going to make you get new hardware when they go to a new Windows version. So sometimes it's fine, it's hardware agnostic, and then other times they make core changes to Windows where you have to end up swapping out the actual hardware. So it's kind of looking like that's what this swap's going to be. So towards the last quarter of 2025, Windows 10 is going to go away, no longer going to be supported. It'll be a vulnerability. So we're going to start the process of swapping out the machines. So this year, put in around 70,000, 79,000 to handle the swap. But there's going to be a larger component of that, the fiscal after this. So right now we're trying to get a feel for how much hardware we're actually going to have to replace. And then we'll have a more accurate idea when we go into the fiscal after this one. And that'll be the second phase of that project. Aside from that, I have no new staff positions, no new expanded services, or no promotions. So aside from that, it's my typical renewal. I'll answer any questions if you have it. It's very granular and riveting, I know.
I would put a plug in for James and his staff. When we had to go remote during pandemic, they did a great job of getting us set up, of answering questions remotely and keeping us as connected as possible. And then, as you can imagine, with James and 3 other people, organizationally, that's our IT staff that handles public safety, public works, this building, everything that we do that is IT related goes through those 4 gentlemen. So they do, pardon me, they do an excellent job. Most of their time is spent with me, so it's, but they're again, they keep us going. In an environment that what they do is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity, so.
Are you confident we're doing as much as we can right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with the user education, like the phishing stuff that we've sent out, like they do at your employer, use the exact same product because that's almost industry standard at this point. That's been super helpful, but also every year, this will be the first year where we didn't have a new major system, like security system to drop in. We talked to some of our Cisco guys and they were really, they call it your security posture, but they said that ours was substantially better than organizations our size. So yeah, we're doing about as much as you can do. Like I said previously, you're eventually going to get it. I mean, if someone ends up making you the focus of their effort, you know, something eventually is going to get through. It's just you try to manage the magnitude of it. So yeah.
Quick follow-up on that, because dealing with real estate, we had the recorders shut down and pretty much stalled real estate transactions in the state for, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks. And they didn't have redundancies built in place. Do you have redundancies if we have a cyber attack that we can still continue the business?
Yes. Yeah. So essentially what we end up doing is, that's one of the beauties of virtualizing. You always hear stuff about virtual servers. Historically, it was like a server was they now call it bare metal, where it's like, you know, it's a server, it has one server on it. The beauty of virtualization is you can have a server, but it has a whole bunch of, like, think of them as fake software servers inside of them. So you have, you know, to a user, you have 10 servers, but in reality, it's all running on one box. Well, at that point, it's just files that you can move around and back up to other locations. So that's one of the beauties of virtualization is we have a DR site that's a disaster recovery site that's purpose built at Station 43. And every night, our servers are copied from here. Our virtual servers are copied over to there so that we have an actual backup location. Probably, I would say our next step in that regard to harden ourselves against stuff like that is we will be going to something called hyperconvergence, probably around 2025, 26, when I'm looking at having to physically replace our virtual environment's been running since about 2015-ish. So when it comes time for that hardware to be migrated out, we'll be going to something called hyperconvergence, where essentially you have a large appliance, you have 2 appliances, you have one and a sister unit that live at 2 locations, and they in real time mirror each other. So that way you end up, if one goes down, you have automatic failover. Because the solution that we have, even though there is some redundancy built in, it's still kind of hands-on. Like, it's not something where it can go down and immediately come up. It's something where myself or my staff would have to touch it, and, you know, there would be some downtime involved. not nearly as much as if, you did have anything like that in place. But yeah, they're always coming out with new technologies that help with that. But yeah, I would say we're in a really good spot. Like I said, no one's impervious. I absolutely do not ever want to give the appearance of that. You can do what you can with the money you have, and like I said, it's one of those things where it's going to happen. It's just a question of the severity, and all you can hope is to mitigate that.
Are you seeing more threats, though, to a city like that? I mean, to the local governments in general, or?
You can see that reflected in, Mr. Conyer and I talk about this all the time, but you can see that reflected in your insurance. Like the insurance companies took an absolute fleecing over the last 2 years from just insuring small municipal governments. Because what ends up happening is you have to think about the smaller guys. They're way smaller than us, like towns of 8,000 people and whatnot, where they might not even have actual IT staff. That's something where, you have the local office computer person set something up, and, and they used to insure them just like they insured us. But then they're super vulnerable to attack because they just don't have the means or the expertise to mitigate some of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So yeah, that sector took an absolute beating last year. So there was even some question, and some of them won't even touch a municipal government at this point because it was really bad. But yeah, I'd say we're in a good spot.
One of the pieces of legislation out there is to classify technology as a essential corporate purpose. So that would give you more flexibility financially to secure yourself, to buy equipment, to do things that would protect yourself from those type of things that James has mentioned. I'd also say that we buy, ICAP is our primary insurer for casualty. We go to the open market, and I can't remember the name of the company, it starts with a B.
Oh my God. For some reason, my brain's saying Berkshire.
Okay, so anyway, so this company has raised our rates, and we're lucky to get it, but we also have to follow their protocols. And if we fail to follow their protocols, then we'll lose the insurance. So again, just kind of reflects what James said, is that the market is responding, pardon me, accordingly. If you get 5 accidents in a year, your insurer is going to drop you. And the same thing is reflected in the cyber world. If you get certain breaches or certain problems, and a lot of them can be employee generated. They open the wrong file, they hit the wrong button, and all of a sudden something bad's going to happen. So again, the insurance part is really, really critical to us.
Yeah, and most of them are most of the bad attacks are like malware attacks. You can't just it's not, as a person, I can't just go through someone's firewall and put malware on their computer. You have to end up duping somebody or social engineering or something like that. And that's, user education is very important.
Any other questions?
Thanks, James. Sure.
All right. Shoot him an email.
With a suspicious link in it.
Yeah, and he'll just delete them like he does the rest of it. Yeah, it's one of the things he's taught us is that be careful and delete what you don't look at, so.
Don't click on the phishing email.
Yeah, don't click on the phishing email.
Remedial class.
Yeah, I've done it twice. I've done it enough times that I have written down the answers when they have a test. So I pull out my cheat sheet and I say, okay, this one, and this one. I take a shortcut. Not what you're supposed to do, but.
AJ in the Army, they got so angry at people failing this that if lower enlisted folks had issues with phishing schemes, they made the commanders do it as well. So the commanders had to do it over and over. So you could implement that.
Yeah, but I'm kind of on the top. I'm on the top of the chain here. So. Anyway.
Don't vote for that.
Yeah, they would be angry at me. Okay, let's go to page GG19, which is Human Resources. Aaron Freeman is our Director of Human Resources. Aaron, you're at.
I just had one question on the budget, just overall. What the impact of a penny on our levy this year? What is that?
38,000.
Okay,
It's at the-
you probably covered it somewhere. I missed
Yeah,
it.
it's at the bottom of that, the big long one that I
I was
handed
trying
out.
to gauge
Right
that.
down there. Sorry, I threw out a lot of numbers off that page.
That's what I needed, and you probably said it, and I just missed it, so thank you, all right.
Aaron, you're up.
Can attest that James and his staff have put the fear of God in all of us.
about phishing emails, so that they've got that well under control. Well, as AJ mentioned, if you flip to page GG19, that goes over the human resources budget. For the most part, it's a pretty self-explanatory budget, but I will go through two of the significant budget impacts laid out there on the first page in the narrative are data processing and staffing expenses. If you recall, AJ and I approached you last year about the creation of a shared executive assistant position for the City Hall wing of City Hall, of our admin wing. At the time, I think we probably underestimated the HR needs for that position, so we'd like to move forward with that being just a dedicated HR position. So a little bit of background on that. I pulled some information from Nikki's budgets, and in the last 10 years, our workforce has grown at 47%. So in fiscal year 13-14, there were 172 positions in the budget. The one in front of you today has 253, and that's just full-time positions. We also have about 70 part-time seasonal intern positions on top of that as well. So our workforce has grown almost 50% in the last 10 years, which is pretty significant. And as AJ mentioned, there were actually 14 requests and 5 are ultimately in here. So that need to continue to grow will probably not slow down anytime soon. Also, some interesting statistics in about that same time frame over the last 10 years, we have usually about 10% turnover, which is pretty standard, nothing out of the ordinary. Last year it was 15%. So we're seeing a little bit more mobility in the workforce. Some people are leaving to pursue other opportunities outside of the public sector. I know we see that predominantly in public safety. We see some of those police officers especially leaving for totally different occupations, to go into finance or a family business or something entirely outside of public safety. So it's not necessarily reflective of the city of Urbandale, just of, mobility within the workforce at the present time. We're also seeing a significant reduction in applications. So not to scare anybody, but in the last 5 years, our applications per job have reduced by 70%. So that is very significant. You combine that kind of a perfect storm with 50% more workforce, but 70% less applications and a little bit higher of an attrition rate. And we have a lot more HR and recruiting needs to maintain and recruit staff than we ever have in the past. So there's a lot of pressure on us to do that. At the present time, we have about 10 regular full-time vacancies and also starting the process to hire 35 summer staff as well. And then with the 5 additional in the budget. So there's no shortage of work to do in the HR department. We're also always looking at ways to improve our total compensation and benefits package, as AJ already touched on a little bit. We're seeing and the surveys that we put out to staff, and we also do a candidate experience survey for anyone that applies for a job with us, and then just other research that we find through our brokers and whatnot, is that different generations coming into the workforce are looking for different things. And IPERS and health insurance are predominantly what had attracted people to the public sector in the past, and that isn't the case now. Younger workers coming into the workforce just aren't as interested in a defined pension plan because they don't plan to stay for 30 to 40 years. And they aren't in a position where they have, as many medical needs. So the health insurance, being very attractive isn't something that they're looking for. So trying to supplement that with other things, like last year we added some supplemental voluntary insurance policies to the benefits package. This year looking at increasing the 457 deferred comp contributions as an attraction that, okay, well, if you don't plan to be in the IPERS program for 4 years, here's at least some, retirement contributions that are mobile and you can take with you, so that we can take advantage of you in the, 3 to 10 years you do plan to stay in the government sector. So we're always looking at ways to make ourselves more attractive for both people looking for public sector employment and people who aren't, which, like finance, IT, HR, we have a lot of positions that are mobile in and outside of public sector. So we're, to some extent, trying to recruit against the for-private sector as well. So aside from that, with the additional HR staff, we should be able to implement some of the additional programs that we're looking into. You'll see an increase of $11,000 in data processing. We hope to be able to implement an online electronic wellness platform next year, as well as an online electronic performance management system, which we've talked to you a little bit previously about during AJ's evaluation. So hopefully the additional staff will help us to be able to roll that out. And then while it isn't necessarily budgetary, I did just want to bring to your attention, the Urbandale Police Sergeants have filed a petition with PERB to organize their own union. So I want to just make you aware of that. So Chief Johansson and I have been working really closely with our legal representative and going through the process for that as well. So that's something that we'll keep you updated on as we know more about. You bet.
About the new position, you're not getting rid of the executive assistant.
We'll be breaking it out. Yeah. So
Yeah, well, actually, Kristen resigned to go full-time college student. So she went back to graduate school. So we've left that position open, but we're going to fill it. It's one of those positions that we're backfilling that with another position like that.
So there'll be no longer an executive assistant.
I'm not sure what we titled was,
Called an administrative specialist now because it's actually shared with clerk and city manager.
Yeah.
So
So you'll have it.
hers is
yes,
separate.
and
Yes.
they'll still have a
yes,
resource.
yes.
I didn't want
No.
you to lose.
Well, I appreciate that, but no, and yeah, that's, one of the things we talked about is that when Kristen gave her resignation, again, she went back to graduate program full-time, we said, okay, let's take a pause here. How did this work? How this didn't work? Because our goal was, as Aaron mentioned, hey, there's 8 of us. We can make one person busy for eight directors. Well, I think we made one person crazy for 8 directors, and we then found out that we just weren't getting the level of work because it was, I'd have something, Curtis would have something, Aaron would have something, and it was just all over the board. And then the need for HR was still growing. So we talked about, because of work in the clerk's office and how that office has evolved with payroll and the clerk responsibilities, where now it's going to be the city manager's office and clerk that are going to share that administrative specialist. And we think that will work out much better based on our history with that person and just the variety of things that came crashing down.
I just feel like we're almost too lean in the administrative area. Oh, thank you. We're a little too lean on the administrative staffing. I mean, I appreciate your attempts to remain lean, but I think we could, so I didn't want to see us losing a person, but
No,
that means we're getting, that position filled eventually and
Yes.
someone for HR. I think that's good.
Yep,
Yeah.
the third position for HR will be really instrumental, not just in those ongoing recruiting efforts to help us be more proactive with recruiting as opposed to just right now, just only having the capacity to post a job and see what happens. We are finding, now for the most part, we're still filling all of our positions with quality candidates. So that's great. However, there are positions in the last year that we posted 3 or 4 times and still have not been able to fill those positions. So hoping to take a more proactive approach in that. So this third HR employee will be really instrumental in that.
So I had probably more of a budget question on the deferred comp piece. Did you put it in here assuming everybody takes advantage of it? Or
Yes.
only those that are taking advantage you increased?
Correct. So because I have no control over that, and if we would switch to a automatic enrollment, which is something that we're talking about, so it just went up an additional 1%, and it's assuming across the board. So if you notice in a department that the actual number is different than the adopted, it means not everybody in that department is taking advantage, but I can't budget for them not to take advantage. So we assume the worst and actual happens.
Interestingly, though, we do have a 60% participation rate in that plan, which is incredibly higher than the norm. So we do a good job educating new employees about that.
Thanks.
I'd also mention that Nikki just touched on it, and the 60% is great. This plan, as we roll out, will be, you have to opt out. And so we're going to make that very clear, is that you have to opt out as an employee. It's kind of a, we're looking out for you, so you have to opt out to not take advantage of the plan.
So we have our own plan document, we aren't on the state's?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's just always been voluntary in the past. So it's the, oh, I'll get to that type thing. It's like, no, you should be at least not walking away from free money. So it's one of those things that we're trying to use as a yes.
And people just don't get to it if they don't sign up for it initially, and they'll still have the opportunity to opt out. They'll just have to sign a piece of
Right,
paper with HR.
Aaron, with our recruitment, I noticed it wasn't a significant piece, but it dropped off completely out of the budget this year.
The what?
The recruitment, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. where within the budget are we filing recruitment under?
Each department pays for their own recruitment needs,
Okay.
so that should be individually within their own. We budgeted for recruitment last year, knowing we'd have some specific HR needs, but hopefully won't have that next year.
Okay, thanks.
The executive assistant was in there last year, so
Okay,
we knew that
got it.
position was coming. So that's why. Each department, if they have a new position on there, will have a recruitment
Recruitment line?
on there. Some of them have recurring, so like fire and police, they just have it all the time because there's so much turnover there that we're always going to be running a recruitment for them. But every department, yes, should have that line 11.
And for the most part, we don't pay for recruitments, or we haven't historically. The online applicant tracking system we use, NeoGov, casts a really wide net for us. It's a part of the licensing fee, so that automatically goes out to your big ones like Indeed and governmentjobs.com. So
Okay, yeah, I think that's what I was looking for more specifically. Thank you.
Yeah. Most of the expense in those is background checks, driving history, those kind of things that need to go along with it, drug screen. So it's more of those are the out-of-pocket type costs. There are a couple that we would probably tend to pay for, but not much, really. So most of the cost is here's your offer, you need medical and background and all of those legal things.
They mentioned our biggest expense are in the police and fire because of the extensive background, the physical to be into the 411 system,
Polygraph, all of
polygraph,
those
the
things.
mental evaluation. It's just a much more complicated and much more elongated process, and it's always been that way. So it's expensive when you look at public safety-related officers.
are there any questions about either the HR budget or anything that I talked about today? Okay, please. All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Aaron.
Appreciate it.
They don't say anything, get off there real quick.
Run, run.
You guys
You don't want them to think of
right.
anything, Aaron, you know? All right, we'll go to, keep on turning this off. Public safety is our next one. Again, if you'll turn to the public safety tab, as I mentioned previously, public safety incorporates police, fire, emergency response, Westcom, animal control. So we will first begin with the police, and if you'll please understand that under police is also, Rob gets the pleasure of dealing with animal control as well, and that's one of the things he really relishes. Good news, great news there, actually. So if you'll turn to PS3, Rob Johansson is our police chief. He's here today. Rob, is any of your staff joining us today? Are you solo?
No, just me.
Just solo. That's all we needed, just the
Very
chief.
similar to James' comments when it comes to my staff.
I'm sure they're online.
Mayor and members of council, here to present the police department budget. I'll just run through the outline that, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'll run through the outline that Nikki provided for us, and we'll go from there. So known budget deviations for this current fiscal year. There is a potential shortfall in the Westcom line due to some issues with the E911 funds. I know that you've been presented a little bit of that. I know Supervisor Brownell was here one time talking about that as well. Those funds have been frozen as they do an internal audit of the budget down there. And so that's holding up some of the funds that that Westcom had initially planned on to operate this year. So there's a potential there for a shortfall for us, for all the cities. And our share of that is about $100,000. Nikki assures me that due to some personnel shortages that we had over the year where we didn't have full staff, that we can likely cover that within our current budget and not have to make any adjustments. We're hopeful that that will be resolved soon and that money will be there for us and we won't have to come up with that extra cash. But that's the only known budget deviation for the police department for this current fiscal year. Jump into staffing. We have one new officer position for fiscal year '24 in this upcoming budget. We currently have 2 open officer positions. We have one officer that's currently just started the Law Enforcement Academy in January. We have 2 more certified officers that'll be beginning in February. And we have one officer that's just graduated from the academy in December and is in field training right now. So that's kind of an update on where we're currently at. as far as staffing. Retire.
The two certified officers that you hired, so those are people that have already been through the academy, so we paid them, didn't we?
We have a bonus system for them. Yep. So there's a $5,000 bonus incrementally over time. When they get through their initial training, they get a portion of that. And then at year 2, they get another portion. And at year 3, then they get the balance of that $5,000.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I will tell you, that number is going up around the state as far as what
The bonus
departments-
number?
Yes, to attract, because it's a big deal if you can get a certified officer to come work for you. So the certified that we have, one is from out of state, and they have to go through a testing process with the academy, but they don't have to go out there for 4 months. So we can kind of incorporate that into their training and get them through that. And then the other one is an Iowa officer, Iowa certified police officer already. So that's good. They're good grabs for us.
So you'll be coming back to us with a request for a higher sign-on bonus?
You know, that is incorporated actually into the union contract. So, yeah, so when they rebargain that contract, I would expect that number might go up a little bit, just based on what's going on around the state.
Yeah, we've seen 10, 15,000 for cities. And as the chief has mentioned to you numerous times, the recruitment for qualified individuals who want to be in law enforcement, that pool has shrunk. And it's unfortunate because but for the reality in the state of Iowa, it becomes, you get your certification. And if you're wanting to be in law enforcement, it's a very desirable commodity. But yeah, there are communities, I think I saw one, City of Marion, $15,000. Plus, if you came on as a certified officer, you get in at whatever level you left your last agency. So they would grandfather you in at 5 years experience, 7 years experience, whatever it may be. So it's extremely competitive. I'm sorry, drop.
Those kind of arrangements really need to be talked about with the police union, because obviously you have current employees. So if you're talking about lateral transfers and money for people to come here, that, you know, we're going to have some equity there. So that's why we've incorporated that into our contract there as well. So I can tell you that almost all the metro agencies are looking for officers. I think West Des Moines, last I heard, was looking to hire 8. So it's super, super competitive out there. We are posting again here in a couple weeks. We have a civil service hearing coming up to approve that process, but here in a few weeks, we'll be posting again. It's just, never seen anything like it in my career, just continually reposting and reposting for the job. We used to post once a year. List would be good for a year. We had our pick of candidates, and that was all we had to do. It's not like that anymore.
I guess with recruiting, how far out? I mean, do we start trying to cherry pick other metros across the country? And do we have any way to offer like even a moving bonus?
We haven't researched that. When you're talking about recruitment budgets, ours is minimal. As far as advertising and those types of things, we use the NeoGov system where we get out on Indeed and those types of things. It's difficult to recruit from out of state. The ones that we see coming from out of state or are interested from out of state usually have some tie. The certified officer that we're getting in February is in Virginia, but she's originally from Ames and wants to come home. So those are the kinds of things that you see. You don't see a lot of people coming here because this is a global problem, actually, a police shortage. And so all these big departments, I know San Francisco Police Department's down 800 officers. They're talking about, I mean, critically cutting back services in large metropolitan areas because of their shortage of police officers. So,
well, and that's why I bring it up, because the work environment they're under can't be great, and I think we have much better than where they're at. So,
and that was in talking with the officer that's coming from Virginia. That is one of the reasons that she wants to come here. Just different size city, different environment to police in, much more welcoming. The community support was a big factor there in that. So. Yeah, we need to explore that probably further. We don't pay for radio advertisement. We don't do billboards. We don't do any of that stuff. We put it out through NeoGov on Indeed and some of these other government hiring sites, and that's what we've done. So.
And those things we wouldn't have to go through a union contract to do. We could, because again, when it comes to the recruitment bonus, that's
we can recruit any. Yeah.
Everything else, everything you just talked about, we wouldn't have to go through a union to do that.
No, we can do that anytime we want, anywhere we want, recruiting wise, we can do that, yes.
So now Rob will have an adjustment for what, Hawaii? That you'll make a personal trip out there
Right.
to recruit?
We should go scout out some new officers over there, maybe. We have 6 eligible officers for retirement currently. 5 of those are in supervisory positions at the police department. To my knowledge, none of them have given me notice that they're going to retire this coming fiscal year. So, but they're eligible to do that through the 411 system. So just, we do see a few retirements here and there, but again, no one's put in their paperwork or told me they're going to be leaving at a specific date and time. So it's out there. Turnover in the calendar year 2022. So calendar year 2022, we lost 4 officers and 1 civilian supervisor, CLIA manager. 2 of those officers went to Des Moines PD. 1 left for Pottawatomie County. He was originally from Council Bluffs, so he went back home. And 1 left law enforcement for a job outside of law enforcement. And our civilian records supervisor and CLIA manager went down to the Department of Public Safety to be their CLIA manager down there. So that's kind of our turnover for the year. That's getting to be pretty normal for us, 4 or so. I hope not to have any, but that's what's kind of been the pattern here lately. New and changing and adapted services being offered. Our CIT position, the lights were on in the office this week. So they are officially up and running. Baby steps start off here. Our mental health professional is the one that's going to be working in Clive, but because of something going on in the mental health agency where the person that's coming to Urbandale was actually injured in a car accident, I believe. So they're fine, but they need a few more weeks before they're going to be coming back to work. So we got a temporary. The Clive mental health professional is working with us as we get our feet on the ground on this, but we are taking calls for service and starting follow-up in that CIT position. So that's very good to see. So again, that's a completely funded position from the mental health side of that. They pay for the mental health professional, and then they're also paying for the officer. Let's see, new equipment and technology in fiscal year 24. As you guys are aware, we're going to a hybrid police interceptors for all of our replacements going forward. They're based on the information that we received from some other agencies that have used them. It looks really good, and it should save us some money in gas and some repairs as far as brakes and things like that. They saw their costs go down, so we're hopeful that that's going to work for us as well. We're still waiting for them, just like all other vehicles. They're supposed to be coming this first quarter. So we've had a couple damaged in accidents and things, and so our fleet is needing some replacements to get here. So we're hopeful that they'll get here soon. We have an expansion of our flock camera system in this budget. We're currently running 14 flock cameras, and we have requested to move that up to 20. And so that is in the budget as well. The flock cameras have been a tremendous success, both from an investigative standpoint and from a patrol standpoint. We've made a bunch of cases with that, and you will see them expanding across the metro. Clive just started their program within the last week, as did Ankeny. So they had their technicians in town, and we're getting everybody up and running in the metro area that had jumped on board with that program. Altoona has them. West Des Moines is asking their council as well for a huge expansion in their flock cameras over in West Des Moines. So the program is really taking off across the country, and which is even better for us because all those are linked. We can, when we search for a vehicle here that's involved in a case, we might get a hit from Eastern Iowa that may be where it came from in the first place. That car may be registered out of there. So it's working fantastic. The officers really like it as well. It helps them identify criminals that are out there moving around in our city, warrants and those types of things. So super successful. So I'm glad to see that and is expanding.
Where is the new, because if I remember right, it's kind of a circle around the eastern side of our community. Where's the new cameras?
So the new 6 are, we're going to move more further out west. But that was the reason we needed a few more, is so we could have coverage out west a little bit further. Exact locations, I don't have those yet. We had the 20 originally set up when they did their trial, and then we went down to 14. I don't think we're going back to the exact locations for that 20. Captain Logsdon manages that program, so he knows exactly where he wants to put them, and I can definitely get you that information, but where he's projecting that we need those other 6 cameras. But they
just out
are,
of
he told me out west.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd seen some others that they kind of had focused around new construction areas with some of their cameras because there was a lot of, tools and equipment walking off
Right.
job sites.
Yep,
So-
and I think what you see a lot with them is your major points of entry and exit, right? So you basically kind of build a gate around your community, if you will. And that way, if people are coming in to do criminal activity, they're using those main thoroughfares most of the time, and that's where you capture the most of your data. So they're usually on those main thoroughfares is where you're putting them. And so if they go into a new construction area, when they come out, are they going down, likely going down one of those major thoroughfares, and that's where we catch them. We are asking also for scheduling software for all of our divisions, but specifically the one that causes us the most grief is patrol. With shift work, 12-hour scheduling, we run off Excel spreadsheets and have for years. And it's just, with the volume of people that we have, it's becoming a burden to do that. And it doesn't offer any flexibility for our employees to log on and take a shift, get notification. Scheduling software allows you to get a notification, hey, there's an open shift for overtime. I can accept that or say I'm available for it off of my phone. We don't have any of those capabilities right now. We're just run off a spreadsheet. So it will definitely move us up to current technology when it comes to scheduling with this new software. I'm asking for a ballistic shield for each of our patrol vehicles and also one for the school resource officer. We currently have ballistic shields in our sergeant's vehicles. And basically what a ballistic shield is, an officer's body armor will not stop a rifle round. A rifle round will go right through it. Unfortunately, go right through that body armor and right out both panels, actually. So the ballistic shield will actually stop rifle fire. So we want that extra level of protection for an officer if we are responding to an incident where we know there's a rifle involved or potentially a rifle involved. They can have that, and they make them a lot smaller now than they used to be. They used to be very big and bulky and heavy. Our emergency response teams have had them for years. They actually have shield operators, and I mean, these things are almost as big as your body, and they'd be the front of the team, kind of protecting the rest of the team from that rifle fire. They've become much smaller now, more portable, and will still withstand that rifle fire. So I want to offer that extra protection to our officers when needed. So we're going to have one in each car instead of that sergeant's car that may be on the other side of the city when this happens. And the same thing for the SRO. You're seeing incidents across the country where there's rifles being used in these incidents, ARs or whatever it is, and it just offers that extra level of protection for that officer to be able to respond to that scene and know that they have something with them that's going to stop that rifle round. So that was a request there. That's really all I had down for police department stuff. I have animal control here too, but I think I'll ask for questions on the police department side before we go into the animal control.
Crossing guard contract. So there's a long history of why we pay for crossing guards. Is this something West Des Moines doing, Clive's doing, or are we still kind of unique in helping to cover costs of crossing guards?
Actually, West Des Moines and Des Moines both had went to the crossing guard service before we did. That's where we kind of found out.
Yeah, the contract I get, it's more the actual paying for crossing guards that is a common throughout the metro.
It's very city specific, to be honest with you. Waukee does not pay for crossing guards. There's cities out there that just don't do that. And they've never taken on that. And this has a history. And it goes back well before I was ever in. And so I guess I see the value in it of having a crossing guard program. I'm not sure. I don't know, I'm trying to not step on anybody's toes here, but I don't really see where that's really the city's responsibility, but you could argue it both ways. I
It is
mean,
a-
we are responsible for pedestrian safety and those types of things. Yet where we're putting them is obviously at each school. So should the schools be responsible? Should we be responsible? Obviously, the schools are paying for part of this, we're paying for part. It's probably a pretty good arrangement, I guess, if you look at the responsibilities from both sides. But it varies greatly between communities, whether or not they offer that service or not.
And so the split between the schools and us is at 50-50 at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
And they help us determine where, with our pedestrian engineering and pedestrian safety committee, they help us determine where they would like to have those, and then those spots are reviewed, and then a decision's made on whether or not we're going to go forward with a position there or not.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a process that we go through, police, engineering, schools. We're having some active discussions right now about the Olmsted School, and that we'll have it with Valerius as well. Because you've taken two schools, you've essentially doubled their size, and then same location. And if you know where they're at, obviously you do. Olmsted has a little bit more flexibility as far as the traffic flow. Valerius does not. Valerius is in a traditional neighborhood setting that has a roadway that goes by. I know they're making accommodations for bus traffic, but that's something that we want to make sure, and we've asked for each of those schools, they had a traffic safety plan put together. We required that. And so we're going to be having discussions here in the very near future with those two schools and about how it's working, how it's not working, and what our expectations are, particularly for Valerius.
There is an annual review of all the positions, but yeah, specifically those schools are being looked at as well.
With the closing of Jensen, will that reduce our expenditures for crossing guards?
I can't remember exactly where the guards are at. I don't know that there's one down. I think there is one down by Jensen. I'd have to look at that list again. I
There is.
don't look at it that closely, to be honest with you, unless something comes up. So yes, if there is one down there, then that guard would either be moved to another location or eliminated. Yep.
Yeah,
And Rolling Green too.
and Rolling Green,
Yeah.
Yep.
So
right.
moving locations.
And that, that service that we contract with All City, as they've done an excellent job, and we have zero complaints of the personnel that they have out there and the way they take care of it. So it's been a really good arrangement for us, and coverage has been fantastic by them. And it's not easy for them to get people either. So they've been struggling as well. And I know they have to move staff around once in a while. So every once in a great while, we'll have to jump out there and help them, but it is rare. They are very good at taking care of it internally. Any other questions from the police side? If not, I will jump into animal control. So this is the good news we were talking about. Last fiscal year, we were kind of in that transition period this time last year. We weren't sure where West Pet was headed. And so what we did, or what Nikki did, was keep the money in the budget that we had been spending for the last couple of years for West Pet. And just because we didn't know what it was going to cost us going forward. As we work through the next 6 months from this time until July 1st, we worked out a contract with Polk County Animal Control they offer us field services now. So in other words, they go out and pick up the animals when they're contained and take them to Furry Friends. And then we maintained our relationship with Furry Friends for sheltering services and worked that contract individually with them rather than through West Pet. And if you'll remember, that rework of that 2080 agreement with Furry Friends also included community cat / feral cat program. So that was implemented in July as well. So we have significantly reduced the budget for animal control. Next year's budget, we're requesting $53,000, and the year before we were at $193,000. Now, I say that, and it seems like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. You have to remember that our officers are picking up the bulk of those calls now. So I did a a quick rundown of calls for the first 6 months from July to December, and just figuring out how many more calls for service our officers are handling as far as animal control. And they're handling about 300 more calls a year is what they're going to average, about 150 for 6 months. So if you push that out, so officers are handling about 300 more animal calls. Now, we handled animal calls before with West Pet, sometimes by ourselves because West Pet was not on duty. So we still had all those, but straight up additional calls on top of that, we're going to look at about 300 more calls for service to our officers.
And I guess, is it mostly loose animals, domesticated animals, or is this the feral cats and those type of?
It is mainly the feral cat. I'll get to the feral cats in a minute, but they're not a big issue with this. It is loose animals. It is animal bites. It is those types of things, barking dogs, issues like that. So anything animal related that we get called out on, you're going to see about, the officers are going to handle about 300 more calls for service. That's basically them replacing West Pet.
And the pet licensing side of it's the revenue piece in here. And supposedly we have more animals, more dogs, not even just cats, more dogs in Urbandale than kids. But yet our licensing is not even close to those numbers.
Right. So one of the goals, I'm veering off my thing here. One of the goals for my support services division is we went to a new licensing services when we went to this all new process. So one of the things that licensing service touted was that they could increase our licensing numbers because they wanted to increase them because they get a portion of that license fee. So it's fiscally, they want to increase those licenses too because they make more money. So they were touting some increases in numbers. I don't know that we've really seen that. Currently, we have about 2,600 animal licenses in the city. Everybody knows that's a fraction of what's out there. So how do we increase that number? I've tasked my support services division, one of their divisional goals for 2023 is how do we increase animal licensing in general, on cats, dogs, everything. So I don't know how we're going to do that yet. Partnering with the veterinaries has helped, and that's what this licensing company was supposed to be doing, is setting up kiosks at the vets so people could license their pet right there and then and make it more smooth for them to do that. I don't see that happening really smoothly yet. So we are going to be looking at it very hard. It's a balancing act because we don't want to become the knocking on your door and, hey, you got a cat in here, where's his light? I don't like that for the police department because we're trying to build community relationships, and that is not helping us build community relationships when we're out there pestering people for licensing, honestly. So it's a balancing act for us. How can we increase that without being adversarial and causing problems for us on other things that we need to handle with the public?
And I guess even if it's just a blind mailing to every household, I mean, it's amazing how many households have animals, obviously. So
It is probably, I would be interested to know, but I mean, just from my layman, I would say a third at least of the residences, if not a half. So if you figure we're, 46,000, 47,000 people, we probably got 20,000 animals in the city. I don't know. Maybe that's a high number, but we are 2,600. I mean, that's not even close. It's not even close.
Right.
So the only time we really deal with licensing now is if the pet gets loose and we get involved and they don't have a license, we make them get a license. We're not penalizing them or anything like that. We're just saying, hey, you got to get a license on your pet, right now. So then they'll take care of it. But I think a lot of them are not doing that. So we're going to try to find out why. We're going to try to find out how we can increase that number. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet, but it is one of our goals for this next year.
not release the animal till it's licensed?
Yes, we don't do that. We make sure they license. If they end up at Furry Friends, they have to have a license before they get them back. Yeah.
Then our new dog park requires a
Yeah.
license in order to get in too, right?
Yep,
Yes, I believe so.
it will, yeah.
Right. To get your dog pass, I think you have to have show your license. Right.
I do know when we went to register our dogs, the system wasn't working, so that was last year. It may still not be working, I don't know.
Right.
It took us about 2 minutes. So
Really?
it was a
Okay.
much better system.
We moved away from Pet Point when we
Maybe
moved.
that's what we were
And it was
using.
a horrible system, and I mean, it was so terrible, and it was just never updated. You couldn't, if you had a pet that passed away, you'd still get notices 3 years later, even though we notified them, hey, take this pet out. There was no way to take the pet. It was terrible. And so this new company that we have, they're very good. We have zero complaints. Every once in a while, we'll get a call from a resident going, hey, I'm sending this license here. Is this legit? And we confirm that, yeah, that's the company that we're using, and it is legit. That's how you get your license. So very, very few problems. But like I said, we'll be working through trying to increase those numbers.
Cost-wise, if we were to do a mailing to every household.
Well, we do postcards, as you know, if you're a resident, you've seen those on snow removal and other activity. So I see Derek is back there shaking his head, and he's gonna find out some
Ballpark,
way.
is this what cost to mail to everybody?
So it's about $5,000 in postage when we mail the postcard to every house in Riverdale. And then the printing of the postcard is about $1,500.
Okay.
We could add a reminder as far as
Oh, yeah. And we've done, when we were using the old system, we added a reminder postcard. So it's a seasonal update that we can add to it.
I guess I'm even thinking a more substantial, something that gets more attention than just the postcard, but I don't know. So
We're gonna
it
look
should
at-
be a revenue positive.
Yeah, if you could just capture
gonna-
5% more
Right.
animals.
We're gonna check with some other communities and see what they're doing, see how, and what success they've had with different programs as far as getting pets licensed, and see what we can come up with. Because honestly, we're not doing a lot with it. We're just, hey, this is a requirement, and we don't really,
So if we actually had the licensing, this would be a net positive budget, not a net negative budget.
right.
And if we can highlight the incentives for registering your pet, you can get them back quicker, you can, I don't know, whatever you do.
Access to the dog park and.
Access to dog park. Yeah.
Pick up your garbage, that type of
That's
thing.
the big-
Right.
I guess that's even a bigger question. Frankly, is there need to be licensing at this point? Or if we have so little compliance, other than the modest revenue we get, is there even a need for licensing? Isn't it really just penalizing the folks that do comply with the law and everybody else that isn't licensed gets they don't pay that. So I don't know.
Right. I mean, you always have the requirements for rabies vaccination outside of that. So it really, the licensing part of it, good point.
What is the purpose of a license for pets?
Probably
Access to the dog park is good,
Well,
because you're gonna
to
have,
identify the owner in case the
Yeah, I was
pet
gonna
is
say, that's
lost
the only
or-
thing I could think of was identification.
Council member, that's right, yeah.
But again, we have requirements for rabies vaccinations and everything. I'm not saying get rid of any of that part of it, but.
well, we
Right.
can't get rid of that.
Mayor, the only thing I would offer is really in my opinion, the licensing fee should pay for the animal control services. Because those are the people that are using the services. Those are the things that are creating the service. So if why should everybody have to pay for that service in the
Right.
city? If I don't own a pet, why should I be paying for animal control? This way, the users or the people that have pets are paying for their own service, paying for the services that take care of those things. So you could argue it that way, I guess, the
Well, I
licensing.
get that, but probably the animals are getting loose are probably not licensed.
Correct, yeah.
But anyway, all right.
Well, and we do have a fine
know.
system in our,
My dogs get loose.
if an animal gets picked up and it's unlicensed, we do have a fine system in our fine schedules, right?
Yeah, so if you get picked up and you don't have a license, yes, first of all, you can be fined for not having a licensed pet, right? And then you also have to license your pet.
Right.
To get it back, yeah.
Do we have, I mean, I know it's only been like 6 months or so that we've transitioned from West Pet to Polk County. Do we have any idea of customer citizen satisfaction with that? Or is that something that we can do on our next
Our
citizen survey?
I think it's in there already.
Okay.
We've had no complaints
Okay.
whatsoever. Honestly, I think with the officers responding to the calls, I think we're probably getting better service than we were before with West Pet. And Polk County's done a fantastic job for us and there not been any delays in getting them over here. Furry Friends has given kudos to Polk County animal control officers as far as how they're working with them in comparison to the relationship with West Pet in the past. So Furry Friends is very supportive of Polk County Animal Control and the job they've been doing as well.
So I do have, I did not think we'd be belaboring animal control as long as we are. But I do, what is the distinct difference between the calls that we are now answering versus what West Pet was answering? Like, again, we're having 300 more calls or whatever, but what are we specifically answering that West Pet was doing?
I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're saying, but when West Pet was on during the day, when their hours of work were going on, if there was a barking dog or a call on a dog that was not being fed or watered or sheltered properly, or there was something like that, that West Pet employee went on that call and our officers were not called at all.
Okay.
That's the 300 more calls.
That's what I was curious
Yep,
about.
that's the
is what
300
is
more
the difference?
calls. If they weren't working, our officers were taking that call anyway. So like West Pet got off at, I think they quit at 8 o'clock at night or 6 or 8. I can't remember what their schedule was back when we had them. Then from that point on, over the overnight hours, that was always our patrol officers anyway going. So they didn't get called out on, like a call out or an overtime situation. It was us handling those calls anyway. So that's why you're seeing 300 more calls. It's basically those day hours that West Pet's no longer available to take that call. Now that falls to the officers.
Okay, that's what I was curious. Thank you.
I will tell you that 2022, we absolutely got slammed for calls for service. I think the year before, in 2021, we had about 17,000 calls for service. We were over 24,000 this year. We are very, very busy. And if that trend continues, I'm going to need more people because it's just putting a real strain on us as far as just volume is just jumped up so much in 2022, and there's a variety of reasons for that and a variety of different calls. There's not one specific thing. Obviously 300 more calls were the animals, but there was a bunch of others to make, that difference as well. So anyway, moving on, I want to touch just real quickly on the community cats. So I checked with Furry Friends on how many of those have we had that they've actually put into the program, and they've had 15 from Urbandale from July to December, December 1, when I talked to her about that number. So from July 1 to December 1, we had 15 cats that had went through that community cat TNR program and were, returned back to the environment after they were spayed or neutered, and no complaints, 0 complaints. The residents that have been involved with that process from those areas were very thankful that we had the program. So all positive on the community cat situation right now. So haven't had any issues at all. So that's good. That's it for pets, I think. If you had any other, we talked about quite a few issues there, but if you had anything else?
I was saying, can we go back to who was it, Bud and?
Bud and Art. Bud and Art.
And the pickup truck.
Yeah.
It was a
And the old North plant was where we kept them out there, where the dog park's going in.
The infamous one was when it was raining, the police called them out. They said, "It's raining. We can't." That's kind of the demise of Bud.
The only question I had, and this is going back more to your police budget. I noticed that both the police and fire were the only ones where there was a difference between requested and recommended for the personal services. I'm just curious why we saw a decrease for both police and fire from what they requested versus what was recommended.
Well, on the police side, there were 2 additional officers plus an adjustment in the sergeant ranks. And so I look at it as a balancing act. And when I look at all the 14 that were requested, I also look at the history of what we've done with the police department. And I don't argue with the chief as far as our calls for services, but we've incrementally, each year, we have at least added 1, if not 2 officers. And that we've also had the vacancies and kind of the trouble filling officers. So I thought at this point in time, again, with everything else that came across my desk and trying to pursue a tax rate that stayed steady, that I looked at the one. And that was for the fire, they had 3 battalion chiefs and an adjustment for a educational person. At this point, our previous discussion, and Jerry can go into a little bit more, but our previous discussion with the city of Clive was as we looked at our joint service relationship, that if we built things out optimally, that we would look at adding additional supervisory positions, what they were called battalion chiefs or some other name. Clive declined to participate at this point in time. So that was one of the main reasons I looked at that, is that, you know, that would just be a significant additional cost for us in that area. So I looked at it as not only balancing, but also some of the cost impacts.
So what does that equate to as far as, because I know you said, the chief, that the calls for service increased by 5,000? Was it 7,000? So how does that equate to number of personnel that you're going to be short on by not having what you requested?
I provide AJ a 10-year staffing, well, it's actually a 10-year plan for everything at the police department, but staffing is the biggest portion of that. So kind of lay out as far as the city's growth and what we need to do to keep up with that. And then I also look at calls for service in that, as well as just officers per 1,000 residents. And there's always been there's formulas out there that every city uses different, but a lot of, you see out on the East Coast, they'll run more than 2 officers per 1,000. And it's just, more densely populated areas and different environment than what we police in. So as I look at all that and compare us to the metro, I usually run us around, or what I try to obtain is 1.26 officers per 1,000. When I figure in our calls for service and things, that's what keeps us pretty steady. So when I give that staffing plan to AJ, it's trying to maintain 1.26 with our growth. The city grows about 1.5% a year. That's what it's been averaged over the last 10 years or so. So that's where I come up with that number of what I need for staff. The sergeant's position was actually needed in the investigation division. We have 1 sergeant in there right now, and the captain is covering for a lot of duties at the sergeant level. So that was the request there. But that's how I come up with that number. When you compare us to other metro agencies as officers per 1,000, I think there's 16 metro agencies that we use in comparison, and we are 14th as far as our officers per 1,000 level. So we're down there. But we do it with what we do, and we work. So we're close to that number, but that's why the number of officers I requested keeps us at that 1.26. And that fluctuates year from year. We can go a little under that sometimes as we build through.
The other huge variance in there, if you look at that PS1,
Yeah.
it's in the 411 contribution. So the requested includes it as if they were funding their entire amount, but the levy actually comes in and takes care of $2.5 million of that, or $2,086,000, sorry, not 2.5, which is on the PS26 is where that comes in. So that's why there's a huge reduction there. So in total, personnel services looks like it's $2 million less than they requested, because the cost of the pension system effectively in that requested column is double counted, because it's the levy amount plus what they would have had to have to fully fund it, because we haven't decided on levy. So
I was looking specifically on PS4 at line 1, but yeah, that makes sense from the
right, if you
overall.
look, yeah, because there's on that PS4, it's $1,274,000 is what it would have cost to cover pension for what they requested, but the buy down of what the levy is providing takes it down to $320,000. So it's still the cost associated with all the officers. It's just that the levy pays a good chunk of that. In fire, you'll see it go to 0, because we fully fund fire's pension and police gets what's left.
No, I was just, when I looked at the overall salary, I was thinking that it was about a 1-person decrease from what was recommended, so I was just curious why we had the 1 person.
It's slightly off topic of this. They mentioned that the sergeants are thinking unionize. How many sergeants do we have?
Currently, we have 10.
Okay. I was just curious about the number.
Yeah,
of how that would
10 at the sergeant level, and then we have three captains that each run a division. So we got support services that handles all of our community relations and all that, and all of our other stuff, vehicles, all that. They take care of everything, building, all that stuff. And then we have the investigation division and then patrol. So those 3 divisions.
And the captains wouldn't fall into this unionization. It would just purely be the sergeants.
It's the sergeants that are requesting to form a union at this time, yes.
Okay, okay. I was just curious.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do other departments in the metro have unionization for the sergeant level, or?
The only one that I can tell you that does is Des Moines. There is some employment law that may not allow them to do that, and that's why we just had a hearing this last week on Wednesday with the PERB, with the Public Employees Relations Board, and they're going to make a ruling whether or not they can unionize or not based on their supervisory duties. So the city presented their case on them having supervisory duties that would restrict them from forming a union, and they presented their case that they don't have that supervisory duties to that level that would prevent them from, at least by the law, prevent them from organizing. So that's where the PERB board has got in there, and it looks like, oh, they have to have their briefs in 4 weeks. So this decision is going to be made by PERB probably, I would guess, a couple months down the road here.
But there is precedence that Des Moines allows their.
They do. It's a little different animal down Des Moines because of the size and the layers of supervision that they have. So we have our in my opinion, we have our supervisors doing a lot more of that restrictive, that would restrict them. We have a lot, whereas the Des Moines sergeants, they're lower down, if you will. They have lieutenants and captains and majors, and they have a lot of supervisory levels above them that take those duties away from them, if you will, that maybe allowed that, and but not sure where that's going to end up. I'm not an expert on that side of the law as far as whether that's allowed or not for them. So just, yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief.
About to go to fire EMS. I saw, yeah, there's Jerry.
I think we can take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break. Clock is running.
That's why he's here. Of course, all the department has an opportunity to have input on budget requests. So what you see before you has been vetted up through the department, through the officers to a submission to you guys. Currently, there's no known deviations in the budget that we have going on now, other than the same problems that everybody else has. Everything's way more expensive than it was, fuel, the whole 9 yards. EMS supplies, everything that everybody else is seeing, we're seeing that as well, but no known deviation beyond that. We did have the staffing request that has been talked about. We requested 3 battalion chiefs, and just a little bit about what that is the captain today is in charge of the shift, and if they go to an incident, then the captain is part of the crew that has to mitigate that incident. So if it's a fire and that truck's the first one in, he's going to be inside. So we need somebody outside to run the incident. From a fire standpoint, from an extrication standpoint, from the day-to-day operations, this person typically doesn't go to every call, but goes to the calls that require significant involvement of people. So it's the person that's going to run the show, if you will. They would also have additional assignments that would be attached to areas like EMS, community risk reduction, those sort of things. And the issue with Clive, we had that discussion with Clive. It was part of our standards of cover document that was produced in 2017 that we should have a battalion chief in place. and Clive at that time was willing to pay half of that price. As we had their discussions last year, Clive didn't want to pay half of it. They were willing to participate, but they just weren't willing to pay half of the cost of doing that. And, you know, even though they're a one-station department, you can't really break it up and say, well, we're only going to spend one station time on Clive issues. So it's something that should be more evenly split. And from my perspective, I certainly understand why we didn't get that funded this time. If you look back at how much funding has gone to fire department staffing since 2009, no other department in the city has gotten what we've gotten. So we understand everybody has needs, and we just have to kind of wait our turns when that can be fit in there, because that's certainly understandable. We've grown more than anybody else in the city. We needed to, but certainly have done that.
So
The
Chief,
other,
I guess on that, how many calls would a battalion chief be needed?
they would go to all the extrication calls, they would go to all fire calls, and then fire calls that aren't even in our city. So I think we had 17 structure fires in Urbandale last year. But when you look at mutual aid fires, because we're all staffed the same, so we all respond, that's going to be over 70 responses that would have been for structure fires. So that to Grimes, to Johnston, to Clive, Windsor Heights, wherever the case may be, Waukee as well. So they'd have all of those responsibilities, but it also just gives us another administrative person to do some other stuff that's not getting done today, so.
Thanks.
The other request was to move one of our part-time fire prevention public education specialists to full-time. He's currently working 24 hours at this time a week, and as we talked about in the strategic planning process, and as we have talked about best practices changing from just the perspective of fire prevention to more of a community risk reduction, not only trying to mitigate an incident, keep it from happening, but looking at what those incidents are that we can keep from happening. For example, one of our biggest calls in Urbandale is for falls, but we do little to try to work to prevent falls. We have started a couple programs this year, or in 22, but I think we can really expand on that if we have the people to do that. So it's just a shift from doing fire inspections and that type of work to a bigger scope of that. And one person would help with that, making this one full-time, but that's not the end game. It'll take more people to do what you envision as community risk reduction in the community than just the fire marshal and one full-time person. So that's a process, that's a long-term look at that. Currently, we have 2 open positions in the department. We have the same issues that the police department shared with you. Probably what's more significant to us today is the fact that Des Moines is now looking at the suburbs to get some of their people for their fire departments. Traditionally, they had hired people with no certifications and no training, and they put them through about a year of training to get them where they could use them. Now they've figured out that the people in the suburbs are already trained, they're well-trained, they have all their certificates, they can bring them on and in a much shorter time start utilizing them. So they've taken that approach. I certainly understand that. If I was Des Moines, I'd take that same approach as well. But that impacted us. We lost 4 people, or 3 people in 22 to Des Moines and 1 this year to Des Moines. And then additionally, 2 other people that were on our list to replace those people went to Des Moines. So it's had a significant impact.
Are they actively recruiting those, or is it more passive, or is it an active?
It's more passive. They're not contacting our people on our department, that I know of anyway. But they're advertising that this is a shorter recruit school than what they've traditionally done. And it's working well for them as I thought that it probably would. Excuse me. So I think some of the allure to go to Des Moines is not only more money, they're the biggest fire department in the state, but it's more opportunities. There's 11 fire stations. There's the ability to specialize in technical rescue, hazmat, some of the things that we don't offer because it doesn't make sense for us to do them for something that happens once every 10 years when Des Moines takes a regional approach and they're going to respond to those more often and be better set to do that. So we currently have 2 open firefighter positions. We also have an assistant chief's position that's been open since March last year that we're working on filling right now, and that should be filled hopefully sometime in early February. No significant new services being proposed. Again, our focus is trying to move from fire prevention to more of a risk reduction. We're currently doing the community risk assessment. We're identifying what are those things that we can do things about, what training programs, what can we do to reduce that. The benefit to us is obviously to our customers, they're not having those things happen to them. And then the great thing for us is that's fewer calls that we have to deal with. So it's a win-win, if you will. And then we continue to work on the accreditation process. As I mentioned, we're working on the community risk assessment. As soon as that's done, then we start on the standards of cover, which is really simultaneously. It looks at all what we're supposed to be doing, how we're doing those things, how well we're doing those things. My goal is to have that done by the end of March so that we can get back into our self-assessment and hopefully get that submitted within a short time from March, April. Our goal is to have a site visit between now and August, or between March and August, and so that we can achieve accreditation and an August hearing. If that doesn't happen, then it would be March of next year. That would be the next hearing we'd have an opportunity to go to. With one assistant chief, it's me doing it, so I'm doing that and all the other stuff that I have to do as well. So we're hard at work at that. One of the things that was asked for that was new in the budget is paramedic training funds. Our approach has always been that we hire somebody that already has firefighter and EMT, and then the next level of EMT we're looking for is a paramedic. We have not provided that training. Several people have joined our department and went on and got paramedic training, and then obviously they get a raise for being at that level. But our approach has never been to pay for that training. Because of the difficulty in getting candidates, it's just something else that we can do to offer is the opportunity to train people to that level. I will tell you that if you're a firefighter, EMT, paramedic in central Iowa, you won't have one job offer. You're probably going to get 3 or 4 job offers. It's just that competitive in trying to find people. And with that, I've never been the fire chief that says we need to keep up with the Jones. In fact, I think I've been more bigger picture than most people in that everybody don't need to do this and everybody doesn't need to do that. If we have somebody do this, then that's better for everybody if we share that resource. But one of the things that is keeping up with the Jones is those battalion chiefs positions, because that's how other departments are structured. That's how fire departments traditionally work. And for me to tell you, well, we just need to do it because everybody else is doing it, I would never do that. But I would add that that's part of trying to be competitive and competing with the people that we compete with, where they have opportunities to do those in other places. New equipment and technology. These are the bigger items that were requested in this budget. The biggest one being new portable radios. That's going to be a $335,000 investment. Our radios are reaching end of life. They have to be replaced by 2025. So we started a process where we'll replace the portable radios in this budget, and then in the following budget, we'll request the mobile radios. Much lower cost for the mobile radios. I think it's about $75,000. But it's a big investment. It was a big investment when we bought these radios. And, you know, it's crazy. Back when the radios were not very sophisticated, low technology, they'd last for 20 years and it was a brick. You could drop it. You could do anything with it. It worked forever. These are much more sophisticated. They have an end of life assigned to them by the manufacturer when they're built. And you pay a lot more for them. So, I mean, I think we used to get a radio for about $500. These radios list for about $4,500. So very expensive. Yes, yes. And this price is whatever the price will be at the state contract level. So we have access to that. Station communication, one of the things that we asked for in the new budget is a product called First Arriving. It's much like the screens that you see here, except that it's streaming live information. So anywhere in the fire station when there's a call, you'll see the address. You'll also see any special notes like a road's blocked or a road's closed for construction, anything else that fire department administration wants to send out so we keep better communications with the people on the scene or in the station. It'll also have a performance benchmark component to it. So they'll be able to say, well, here's what our response times are, here's what our turnout times are. So they'll be able to more efficiently manage their performance. The next item is a cancer program. I should have said cancer prevention program. You know, that doesn't sound very well, but one of the big initiatives in the fire service is our degree of cancer is much higher than most other professions. So we're trying to do what we can to prevent that from happening. and not only prevent it from happening, but when it does happen, make sure that we identify it early enough that we can get somebody well at a lesser price and make sure that they continue to do well. So our cancer program has two components to it. The first one is a hood program that reduces the particulates that the person gets exposed to. And I would tell you just quickly that when you're in a fire, it's not like it is on TV. It's just you're surrounded with smoke. You're totally enveloped in smoke. And anywhere there's skin exposed, it's going to get there, and those particulates can pass through the neck membrane to get into the human body. We already wear a hood, but our hoods do not do anything to stop those particulates from coming through. So these new hoods are particulate, they stop the particulates from coming through. So they're a little bit more expensive. So our plan is that starting in July, we'll buy these new hoods. That'll be a primary hood for somebody. After they have a fire, they'll take that one off and wash it. They'll use the old hood until the new one's clean, and then they'll be back into that one. Much more expensive. That's about a $12,000 investment there. We're also going to be buying everybody a second set of gloves. So that same thing that we found in the cancer studies, that through the hands and through the neck areas, two common areas where that's entering the body. So same thing, they'll have a pair of gloves. Once they finish the fire, they'll wash that with their gear. They'll have a clean pair of gloves to go until they hit the next one. The next component of that is cancer screening. So we're going to add a component to our physical where we do some cancer screening, and that'll look for a small number of cancers. And there's other screening available. In fact, there's one that looks for over 50 different types of cancer markers. And our goal is to hopefully get there, but we want to pursue a grant to do that because obviously that's a very expensive test. It's roughly about $900 an employee to have that test. And it's broken down on certain ages get tested for certain cancers or when you have this done. But our goal is to pursue that through a grant to try to make the most of our funding and use the smaller one as part of our physical until we get there. So certainly a move forward. One of the best practices that's identified is that everybody have a second set of turnout gears. Where turnout gears is very expensive, about $3,500. Quite honestly, we just don't have enough fires to justify everybody having two sets of turnout gears. Because even though I tell you that we'll have 12 to 15 fires, working structure fires, that one person's not having 12 to 15 because that's every 3 days they're working, so it's a small number. So we think that we can still continue to wash their gear, decontaminate them as quickly as possible, and not go that route. But that may be something at some point in the future that becomes so much of a best practice that you have to do that.
And just out of curiosity, when you talk about washing gear, is that a third-party service that we send this gear to?
No, each of our stations is equipped with an extractor, so it's a little bit different than a normal washer in that it spins harder and cleans the gear a little bit differently than you would for normal clothing to make sure you get all those contaminants out of there. If it's bad enough that we have to send it off, we have people that we can send it off to, and we often do that for minor repair of turnout gear and that sort of thing, and they can clean it as well. But traditionally, day to day, when you finish the fire, at the fire scene, get all that washed off of you as best as you can, and then you come back and you wash your turnout gear. Next item is the SCBA fill station. The SCBA is the air tanks that we wear. There's currently a fill station at Station 42 and at Station 43. This one would go at 41. And it's one of those things that I would tell you, can you get by with one fill station? Yeah, if you had to get by with one fill station centrally located, you could do that. The problem is that the other stations, when they have to fill their air bottles, have to go to that central station to do that. And when they're at the central station, that's less time that they're in their area and their territory to cover that. So, I mean, that might look like Station 41 goes to Station 42 to fill their air bottles, and then there's something that happens in Station 41's area. 42, depending on where their truck is parked, may be actually a closer response than 41, if that makes any sense to you. So this is going to take advantage of some equipment that we purchased some time ago. Our current rescue truck that you guys approved, a new light rescue truck, our current rescue truck has a fill station on it, just doesn't have an air compressor to fill it. So typically you take that truck, plug it in and fill it. We're going to remove that fill station and buy a compressor system and put it at Station 41. So they will have at a lesser cost than buying a whole new setup, about half the price, the ability to fill their bottles. So that gives them the opportunity to train at their station and not have to worry about running back out to the other station and fill their bottles. There's also some requested funds for new equipment for our trench rescue and the new ladder truck that are on order. The trench rescues, if you remember, we ordered a smaller, lighter rescue truck. And the concept is we'll buy a trailer that goes with that. And in that trailer will be our trench rescue stuff. There's certain, you can't just use plywood. You have to have special plywood, special struts and such. And so that will be where that money goes. And the ladder truck is the new 100-foot ladder truck that will need some new equipment as well. There are plenty of other items that are asked for, but those are the bigger items that are in this requested budget. Our annual report will be out here hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but we did 5,500 calls last year. And what that 5,500 calls captures is actually how many times we get a call and we go out and respond to it. But that number that you see on the right-hand side says 7421 service events is a truer picture of what we're doing. So if you just count the incidents respond to, it's about 15 incidents a day. But when you look at all the other stuff that we do, installing smoke detectors, working with inspections, doing public relations and public education classes like CPR, fire extinguisher, and that sort of thing, you can see there's a lot more to it than just responding to calls. So hopefully I will get that in, like I said, in the next 2 or 3 weeks and have that ready for you. Overall, our calls did go up about 5%. And ironically, our EMS calls, which is our biggest call for service, was down by 3% in 2022. But most everything else has continued to rise. This was some information that you had asked for last year, and I just threw that up there real quick so you could just see it. A little bit less in the number of psychiatric calls in 22, but you'll notice there was a big spike in Narcan use in 2022 as well. And then those are where those patients were transported to. And I will tell you, most of the patients, they don't always get transported. A lot of them end up refusing service and don't go to the hospital, so it depends on the circumstances. But just wanted you to have that, and if you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to get you whatever information you're looking for. Next is emergency preparedness as part of our purview of take care of that as well. We don't ask for any new equipment in the coming budget. We do ask to replace a pole. We have a pole at the railroad tracks on Meredith, about 111, that's leaning a little bit, and it's time to replace that pole. And you may recall last year we asked you to replace 2 poles, but with the beautification project going on Douglas, instead of replacing that pole that needed the most, it was leaning if you've ever noticed it, it was like it doesn't make sense to put another wooden pole there. We need to put a metal pole so it more fits what everything else that's in that area. But there was additional cost of that, so it took some of that money to do that one pole, and we just put off doing the second pole until this year, or until the next budget. We'll also continue to look and see where does it make sense. Do we have any gaps or areas where we're missing coverage on storm sirens? Right now, we're not. But there's always the argument, well, I can't hear it at my house, or I couldn't hear it. You're never going to get 100% of the area covered. And I would tell you, we probably have 100% of the coverage if there's no wind blowing and there's nothing happening. But that's not always the case when we set off the storm sirens. It's always pretty noisy, so you're not going to get them everywhere. And it's ironic because people complain it's too loud at my house, and then the next person that calls is, I can't hear it inside my house. It doesn't wake me up. Well, it's not designed to wake you up. They're designed to be heard only when you're outside. So
we have poles like west of Alice's Road there on Meredith where those new houses are.
Our most western pole or siren would be at the water tower on Alice's Road by the new school. We try to put stuff before it develops so people will know it's there and not complain when you try to put one in somebody's backyard. So we have that area pretty well covered. We have the western area pretty well covered. Actually, the areas that probably have more of a complaint are more on this side of town in that they're just so built up that we used to have a siren at Aurora, about 7600 Aurora. It was a small 1948 type siren that we took out of service several years ago because it was just problematic as it was always breaking down. But it really didn't cover that big of an area because it was such an old siren. And at the end of the day, the outdoor warning sirens, even in their best thing, is technology from the 40s and the 50s that we're using to do this. But there's got to be better ways. We certainly have the alerts on people's phones and those sort of things that help. But you know, you got to have your phone with you. You got to be looking at your phone. We continue to find or to search for the best practice on what we do to alert people to emergencies in our community. Again, hopefully I'll get the annual report out to you here in the next few weeks, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions about our budget submittal.
I know, and I've probably talked about this before, but like the Waukee Fire Department has partnered with the school district to run a paramedic program for high school students. Is that something that would be beneficial for us to do? And I mean, I don't know the specifics of it. I'm sure you actually know much better than I do, but
Sure.
to get kids early, I guess.
No, you're absolutely right. It's an EMT program. It's not the full-fledged paramedic program. But yeah, that's something that we're meeting with the schools to see if we can do some of that. It's through a partnership with DMAC, so they take care of that and hire people to do the instruction. We used to have a program in central Iowa that was at, I believe, the central campus in Des Moines. It died for lack of interest generally, but we're starting to see more younger people wanting to look at some of those things. And of course, we have a ride-along program. We do everything we can to encourage them to see what that's all about and see if it's something that they would like to do. So we're working on that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
All right. Police and fire retirement. I'll let you
Yeah,
care-
I'll cover that one. So these are the new blue pages that we just had this morning on PS 25. So again, this is the police and fire retirement levy. That is a separate levy that we have in place that is exclusively used to cover the 411 pension costs related to those two departments. The current levy is at 37 cents and remains the same for the proposed budget. The information presented there, you can just kind of read through that. I would refer you back to the budget summary section, page 8. All of the budgeted levies are in a special revenue fund. And so up in this budget summary section, I provide you both sides of it so you can actually see all the pieces and components of the revenue side as well as the expense side and seeing the cash balances forward, just because those are independent restricted funds. So if you walk through those, I would point you to the column for the 24 recommended, the transfer in. So this one has lost funds coming in. So this is one of them that the 50% that we have to provide property tax relief. This is the property tax relief difference of what was left over. Excess in one year, we have to spend it down the next year. So this reflects the cash on hand to fully satisfy that 50% that we need to spend on some levy to provide direct support. So that $655,000 is coming in from the local option sales tax, which you see on the next page of that, which is 9. So there's lots of different pieces to it, but this is the one that I would call out that's buying down that levy, which would between that plus the 37 cents, you would need another 8 cents on the levy to fully fund both police and fire. I mentioned that in the police one of what that looks like. So we fully fund and take down to zero the cost of the 411 pension for the fire department. And then the difference of whatever's left over, then I reduce what the police department general fund contribution is. So in order to fully fund that, we would need another 8 cents. So that's just kind of informational purposes. We used to do that back before we did the 8-10 flip that AJ mentioned earlier. When we switched all of that over, we were fully funding 411 through the 411 pension levy. And we shifted those dollars back to general fund to the 810. So that's why we're under that. But I always quantify that. So every time they bring it down, the rate, the contribution rate, so we went down to 22.98 from 23.9 in the current fiscal year. This budget actually went down for the employee or the employer's contribution. So the amount of levy I'm short went down because it costs less. That's really all I have on that one. It's relatively self-explanatory, and we didn't change the levy. Any questions on that one?
All right.
Okay.
There's no questions. Let's move on to Public Works. That will be under PW, or the Public Works tabs, PW number 1. As I mentioned previously, pardon me. PW number 1 under Public Works tabs. The Public Work tab on the front one on PW1 is an overview of everything that is covered under the Public Works budget, which includes the roadway maintenance, street lighting, traffic safety, and engineering services. So that's all inclusive. Yep, there he is. John Larson, our Director of Public Works and Engineering, is here today. John, if you want to come up and introduce your staff that's with us.
Good morning, everybody. Today I have Tim Stovey, our Assistant Director on the Public Works side, and Kristen Brostrom, our Assistant Director on the Engineering side. So today I will run through the different sections of the budget. In the past, I know I've kind of led that. This year, Tim and Kristen are going to take the lead and run you through. So Tim will start us off on the roadway side.
First of all, starting with some things that not only affect the roadway budget, but you'll see across the board with the different public works budget, they kind of affect everything. But first, as far as staffing goes, in public works, again, I'm the assistant director. I've got 3 supervisors in administrative tech, and we've got 31 frontline employees. Of those 31, 6 of them are solid waste operators, 4 of them are mechanics, and so that leaves 21 field employees that do a variety of duties. We added 3 new positions this fiscal year. Long story short, we should be set for quite a while with staffing. We're doing well. So no issues there. Hopefully it's 5 years before we request another employee. Nikki mentioned briefly on the equipment replacement fund. Obviously it hits roadway in our budgets probably more than any other. We probably should have bit the bullet and did this last year, but you know, I'll give you an example. In April 2019, we bid out dump trucks. They're $192,000 a piece. Last April, we bid them out. They were $265,000 a piece. And I'm assuming our next batch of dump trucks will be around $300,000. So, you know, you're looking at basically a 60% increase over about a 5-year period of time. So car and truck prices have gone up about 17% the last 2 years. One thing we'll have to look at definitely is adjusting some lives of equipment. For instance, this latest batch of dump trucks, our fleet supervisor included some stainless steel components in there. So, you know, the chassis on those dump trucks last a long time. It's the snow removal equipment that it rusts away, long story short. So hopefully we can maybe extend those lives to about 10 years or from 10 years to 12 years to kind of offset some of the additional costs. Some additional, you know, like every other department, we've seen some big increases. The good news is when it comes to things like concrete, asphalt, salt, we've seen pretty modest increases. Of course, most of that stuff just gets mined out of the ground, so it's not, it shouldn't increase in price that much. You know, those might have increased 10% over 2 years, but where we've seen significant increases in steel, obviously we use rebar, intake casting. Auto parts are a big one. They've gone up quite a bit. Any pipe, we don't buy that much pipe, but that's gone up significantly. Plow blades, the metal for signs, and of course fuel is another one. And I was asked to explain our fuel purchasing process. Best way. Right now, what we're doing simply, we're not under contract at all. We're just kind of playing the market, and what we'll do is we'll just alert the petroleum companies in the area the day before we need a load of fuel to give us a quote for the next day, and then it'll be delivered the next day. A lot of governments, cities, counties, state buy it on what's called the rack price, which you see in front of you here, and every day the DOT publishes the average terminal prices for fuel. What most cities do is they go out for bid for like a margin to these prices. So a supplier will say, we'll give you unleaded for the rack price minus a couple cents. Normally we get it cheaper than the rack price. And then diesel's, you know, maybe minus a penny or two off that rack price. It's a pretty popular way to fuel or purchase fuel. We buy the U87 E10, 87 octane, 10% ethanol, and most of it is the number 2 diesel. And you can see the prices for Friday were $2.55 for unleaded, $3.24 for diesel. Now, in the past, I think 5 occasions or so, we've entered into a fixed price contract, and the best way to explain it here is just kind of show you the bid tab from last time. We did this in, I think, April of 2020 when oil was $0 a barrel, so we did it at the right time. And we had this pricing up until early June of 2022. But you see at the top part here, when you purchase petroleum, you do it in 1,000 barrel increments. So that's 42,000 gallons. So that's why you see 168,000 of unleaded, 126,000 gallons of diesel. Normally, the city, we go through about 80,000 gallons of unleaded a year and about 70,000 gallons of diesel. What the company bids is a margin to the New York Mercantile Exchange price. So what that margin is, first of all, they've got a profit. Second of all, they've got to pay somebody to deliver the fuel. And third, they're financing that fuel because they're buying all that up front. So, you know, back in 2020, interest rates were pretty low. Now they're not. So I would expect that margin to be quite a bit higher. So over a 2-year period, what we paid petroleum traders is $84,000 to supply us fuel. That's, you know, above the actual price of fuel. So there is a cost to lock into a fixed price contract. That's why I've been kind of nervous about doing it in the environment we're in right now. And, you know, just an example of what fuel prices are doing. This is what we buy fuel off. You can see March futures, unleaded was $2.64 a gallon. The reason why we came with that request at the last council meeting is normally with council procedure, it's a week from the time we award the bid or accept bids until the time we buy the fuel. And the way fuel prices have been going lately, they might fluctuate 10, 20 cents in a week-long period. So if we do, when and if we decide to enter into a fixed price contract, we want to do that like immediately. So that's the reason for that request last council meeting. And, you know, normally fuel prices do this. Lately, they've been doing this. So they could go, you know, I printed this off yesterday at probably, I don't know, 10 a.m. or there you go, 9:15 a.m. And by the end of the day, fuel prices had dropped 10 cents. So that's just kind of showing the environment we're in. So that's a brief explanation of that. I would not enter into a fixed price contract right now, but if I'm told to, we certainly will.
Who makes that decision then? You?
Well,
Who makes the decision if we're gonna enter into a fixed price? I mean, we gave you authorization to do it, so who will be the person to?
Well,
You?
between Tim would call and make
Okay.
that inquiry is that as he monitors the cost, and if he came to us and said, this is the time to do this because I've monitored it, I see that we've seen a significant decline, it's maybe matching up to some previous prices we had, then I would make the call, Nikki would make the call if I'm not here, a combination, and we would yell down the hall at each other, it's time to buy gas. I mean, it's not overly sophisticated, but at the same time, it would be essentially Tim bringing that information to us down here at City Hall. And as he just explained, if you're gonna see a 10-cent variation in just in a business day, you know, there are times that, you know, we depend on Tim and his experience and his monitoring of that market. And, you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So I think we've done pretty good in monitoring those prices. We also have a capacity at our stations. So it's 8,000 gallons?
8,000.
8,000 gallons. So again, the contract's over a lengthy period, but you know, for the times we need them, if we run low and we have an event coming up, we know a big winter storm or something, you know, Tim will just make the decisions to purchase the gasoline or the diesel that he needs.
And I'm not an expert on petroleum trading and selling and buying, but
You're the best we got, Tim.
when we've done in the past, it's been pretty obvious. You know, it's been a pretty obvious time to do it. The first time we did it, it was a council directive. I think we spent $50,000 more on the fixed price contract than we would have just playing the market. But the last 4 times we've been pretty darn successful on it. I mean, long term, over a period of 50 years, you're probably going to pay the same. I mean, buying it on a fixed price is a risk, you know, not not doing it at the right time is a risk too, so. It's, you know, it's an insurance policy, you know, we've done it in the past, it's like, this is a darn good price. You know, we're buying we might be spending $20,000 extra, but we've got an insurance policy, a big spike in fuel prices, so. So moving on to roadway maintenance. Again, no staffing changes. You'll see in line 51, that's our big salt, concrete, asphalt line item. Those costs have gone up quite a bit. The vehicle maintenance supplies, I'll get into that a little bit with the fleet portion of it, but I think you'll see an across-the-board increase in contribution from each department for fleet maintenance. But like I say, that'll be our last budget. We'll get into that a little bit. Some major projects for this year include the Aurora Avenue preservation and the PCC patching program. Other than that, not a lot of changes in the roadway maintenance budget. And I should have hit on this fiscal year, this current fiscal year first. There's no significant variations there. The good thing about roadway maintenance is we kind of budget for a bad winter and a great construction season. They don't ever occur in the same year. So there's always a nice cushion in that budget.
I guess since we have a nice snowy day, you mentioned adding plows to additional trucks. Is it just adding the plows to trucks, or is it adding equipment, more pickups?
No, we're doing pretty well on our equipment. I don't think we've got a lot of big or additional equipment purchases in the future. As far as the equipment replacement contribution, it's just inflation.
Right, but I was just looking at one of the bullet points, and just in the future of, more pickups, more plows. Is it?
Yeah.
So total number of pickups growing, is that what that is about?
Yeah, it's the amount of cul-de-sacs. Obviously, we've got a ton of cul-de-sacs. I think we've got, as an example, when we get a big snowstorm, we send out 16 dump trucks. We're set there for quite a while. But we send out 11 pickups to do cul-de-sacs, so there's a big workload there. And that will be something where, we'll have to add some pickups in the future.
And then when it's not a snow event, what do those pickups do?
My employees always complain there's not enough pickups, but, they're out during the construction season. They're all out of the shop, if it's not snowing, and we can conduct maintenance. So, they'll be pulling around asphalt patchers and, concrete supply trailers and things like that, so.
Okay, so, 350-ish days of the year there's no snow event, so.
Right.
I was just curious what the rest of the year that equipment gets used for.
Sure. Moving on to street lighting, no significant changes there. We've got the whole, as far as I know, every street light in the city of Urbandale has been upgraded to LED. So we're actually requesting about $20,000 less in the budget than last year. I think since it's been probably 7 or 8 years when we started replacing streetlights with LED, and our electricity costs have dropped 25%, so well worth the money. And then traffic safety, again, this year's budget's just fine. A few minor tools that we're requesting. And that budget includes figure out what project. We have $75,000 for the annual traffic signal equipment upgrade program and $30,000 for upgrades to the Merle and Sutton Place signal control and pedestrian crossing equipment. So again, with that budget, it's kind of status quo, not a lot of changes. Engineering services next, so I'll let Kristen handle that one.
Good morning. I actually don't have a whole lot of engineering services either, not a lot of change from last year. We provide a number of services, of course, to the city. 21 and 22 have been very busy for construction inspections, both for development of subdivisions as well as city projects. And I think that might lessen a little bit this year, but things are still moving forward strong. We've got a number of large residential subdivisions in the queue that are coming through. So again, not a lot of changes this year, just keeping on. Happy to answer any questions.
Was this a staff increase?
No,
Well,
no, that's an admin.
that's in the admin part. Yep.
Okay. I think it's back to Tim.
And then moving on to solid waste collection, a lot of this budget is determined what Metro Waste Authority charges for landfill fees, recycling, things like that. I mentioned we have 6 solid waste collection operators. We've got room for plenty of growth. It'll be a number of years before we have to add a 5th garbage truck. And, you know, we supplement our 2 yard waste collectors with another truck when things get heavy in the fall and the spring, but, you know, our existing fleet is going to last a long time there. I don't know, Nikki, did we just got the new Curbit numbers from Metro Waste Authority. Did we include that in there? Has that change been made?
Not the one that netted itself, though? It's in the notes, but I didn't reprint this piece because it didn't net change.
Gotcha. So the recycling increased about 5%. There were no increases in landfill fees, so that was good news for us. You can see about $1.2 million of this budget is what we pay Metro Waste Authority for landfill and recycling collection. As far as the spring cleanup goes, we had some challenges last year. If you remember, we did it over 4 weeks. The good news is this year, Waste Management, or Waste Connections actually came through, and they're giving us some substantial equipment help. So we're going to go back to the original method and get that thing done in 1 week, which is much better. It went remarkably well last year. I think Derek did a great job of getting the word out to all the residents, and it went surprisingly well. But we'd rather just, get it over in 1 week. So that's our plan this year. And that is about it with solid waste collection.
Tim, I've got a few questions,
Yeah.
and this is more my own personal knowledge. As I was joking with Derek the other night, I mean, that's what people really care about, you know, when their trash is getting picked up, and that's the #1 generator on our website, I think. And, you know, just with holidays and things like that. So we have 6 solid waste operators, or how many, or is it 1 per truck? And then what if people take vacation? I mean, just briefly tell me how the system works and how our trash gets picked up, because I think that's really what people care about in our community.
It is, and it's the #1 generator of calls to the office. I would guess 60% of the calls that come into the office are probably solid waste collection related. But we've got 4 automated garbage trucks, 1 person per route. They collect right now, they're collecting about 1,000 homes per day. I mentioned we probably got capacity for 1,200 or 1,300 homes per day. And two regular yard waste personnel. Again, we've got to supplement that with a 3rd truck in the spring and fall when things get heavy. And we just, they go on vacations. We need to add people. We'll just pull somebody from the general pool of employees to sub in for them. And we've got a lot of employees that know how to, competently operate a garbage truck, and they're familiar with the routes. So it's our #1 priority. So,
So the people that have, everybody's in the Monday area on, the Monday collection day, then everybody goes to the Tuesday collection day.
Yep.
Okay, and then you said that the recycling was up. Does that mean our collection was up or the costs were up?
The cost went up about, I think they went from about $420 roughly to $450 per home per month.
Okay.
And that's gone up, I might have some figures here. That's gone up significantly over time. I mean, it was just 3 or 4 years ago where it was $2.70 a month. The biggest reason we've gone from $12 to $14.50 over the last 3 years with our solid waste rate is solely due to recycling. And I know that, they rebid their contract with Waste Management. I know Waste Management was probably underpaid for their collection efforts before, so there was adjustment there. And then they built the new collection center up in Grimes, which obviously our users are paying for. And that was another significant increase in cost.
Is our usage increasing? I mean, are we recycling more or less, or?
Oh, it's pretty stable, but overall, Urbandale residents do a very good job of recycling. The feedback I get from Metro Waste Authority is, as you can imagine, West Des Moines, Johnston, Waukee, Urbandale recycle at a very high rate. And another thing, I'm glad you rattled my brain a little bit there. We charge $14.50 a month. Just a quick breakdown of that is $8.50 a month is garbage, your weekly garbage collection. About $5 a month is your recycling collection. Then $1 a month is things like spring cleanup, special collections, things like that. I know spring cleanup costs really 75 cents per home per month just to do that one collection. So that's just a rough breakdown of that. And we've kept that $8.50 rate. We've kept between $8 and $8.50 per month per home for trash for quite a while. I think we've got a pretty efficient operation.
Thank you for those questions.
No problem. In my opinion, $8.50 a month for a garbage collection is your best deal in town, really. Next is the sanitary sewer and wastewater. And again, this budget is 100% funded by the two sanitary sewer districts, plus they probably pay for a staff engineer in the grand scheme of things. We charge them an administrative fee that covers, Kristen and John's and my overhead, probably along with another engineer for the system. So we've got a very good relationship with the two sanitary sewer districts. They are very aggressive when it comes to maintenance. What we've got going on underground in Urbandale and in Windsor Heights is in excellent condition, and unlike most infrastructure, it improves in condition every year. They're aggressive with their lining program, and that's where you take a clay pipe, you insert a plastic pipe, and you basically turn a 50, 60, 70-year-old sewer into a brand new sewer. They did want to increase their maintenance quite a bit, and it's really because of cost. The cost of the lining program, like everything else, increased quite a bit. Hit on some highlights here. Yeah, they'll invest about $685,000 in property improvements and $350,000 for the lining program. And other just miscellaneous spot repairs. In our revenue, as a comparison, you can see in the memo there, where am I at here? Next year's budget is $1.04 million, and our revenue through the two sewer districts is going to be $1.242 million. So they're paying us about $200,000 above our direct costs. We charge them directly. We perform an hour of maintenance. We charge them our hourly rate. Every repair supply, we pay the bill and we invoice them for it. So, and as you know, we did take over maintenance of the city of Windsor Heights. They were a small operation. They approached us and said, "Hey, we think you can do this more efficiently than we can," and that's gone very well. And we only added about 9% to our inventory, so it hasn't been a big burden on staffing. And again, they've been really aggressive with maintenance. We took over a system that was in good shape, so. In moving on to the stormwater utility, we are a little over budget in the current year, and that's just maintenance supplies. So Nikki, you'll have to do a little budget amendment for that one. There's plenty of revenue to offset that, but. We are asking to buy or buy one dump trailer for our intake crew, and then a tamper that mounts onto a backhoe. That's just for a compaction of earth. The big projects includes the stormwater improvement program, $350,000. The intake program for $250,000. We've got a pipe to repair at 70th and Hopkins. The Merle Hay Stormwater Project for $875,000 and stormwater grant program for $100,000. I think they're flipped around in your
Yeah, they're corrected.
The grant program is actually $100,000 and the stormwater improvement is 350. I think they were flipped around.
It's corrected in the new version.
So the ERU fee increase,
Kristen can answer that, plus any questions on the grant program.
So the stormwater utility fee was instituted in 2014. In 2016, we raised it to $6 for an ERU. An ERU is either a single-family residence or 3,200 square feet of impervious area. For commercial properties, we do have obviously some larger properties that have quite large facilities and quite large impervious areas. So we also put in kind of a reduced rate. You pay $6 for that first 100 ERUs and then $5 per ERU past that. Again, we haven't raised that since 2016. We've kind of been monitoring what other cities have been doing. A lot of cities actually, well, not a lot, a few cities in the metro build an automatic increase into that utility fee every year. So it's kind of, we've got to double check each year, see who's changed stuff. Right now, we're a little below what the average is across the metro for that utility rate. Some people use a different value for the ERU. Some people calculate theirs differently. So it's a little tough to exactly compare apples to apples, but we are a little bit below what the metro has, which makes sense since we haven't raised it in 6-7 years. So we were looking at it, we are proposing a $1 increase basically across the board. So that first 100 ERUs would be $7. Over that would be $6. Our estimated revenue is currently is about 2.5 million a year. Now that's a little higher than what we actually get because engineering monitors how many ERUs are out there. The water utility actually keeps track of like which accounts are active, that sort of thing. So we don't always get an ERU knocked off our books if, there's a demo and a restart. We update that every year or so. So actual revenues are probably only like 1 or 2% less than that. It's pretty close. So if we went up $1 to $7.06, we'd get about another 400,000 a year. So it'd be a little less than 2.9 million per year for that total revenue. And again, that goes back into our operations, to our channel stabilization programs, all those other items.
and so then current like CIP, which uses a lot of these dollars, that doesn't reflect this increase.
This is as a result of needing those into the future, so this is what's funding the future ones.
The current CIP is under the current ERU model.
Correct. It's
This
absorbing
400,000
for
would
the
be an
20
additional dollars that could be
For
used.
the out years, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
John would be happy.
Yes, he would.
Different John.
I'm happy to.
Yeah. Paula Brands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that or the grant program I can answer?
And so I guess always the counter is the economic development side of these. Do you see issues with economic development recruiting projects that bring cranes to town with higher ERU cost?
We don't hear that as a substantial, that we ask about value received for taxes paid. Typically, pretty good satisfaction. We'll watch that though for the future. One other thing that Kristen reminded us that we can do is to make sure that commercial properties are aware of their access to the stormwater grant program as well. We'll make sure to do that in our next.
And with that stormwater grant program, we've kind of removed the limits to give staff more flexibility if there's a unique project out there to say, go for it.
We did increase the limits last year for individual properties. We doubled it. For the total project, we raised it by about 50%. The vast majority of the grant applications we get now are well under the limits for the property. Now that might change if we can get some commercial properties interested. We've only had a handful of commercial properties so far request a grant. They would certainly be eligible if they were going to say clean out their detention basin or restore some of that stormwater management capability in their basins, soil quality restoration, that sort of thing. They're definitely eligible for that. We just haven't gotten a lot of requests from people. So I guess I would expect, and again, in the past too, a lot of our larger grants have come from HOAs. I think that a lot of those issues have either been resolved or the HOAs we've had a couple of grant applications from HOAs, and then they didn't go forward with construction. So we assisted them with some engineering funds, and then they didn't actually complete the project. So yeah, certainly some opportunities for additional grants out there, but most of what we're receiving are well under those limits. So. Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're up.
I gotta stay up here if you're done with Stonewall. Sorry, forgot I was up again. So the next item is our engineering admin. Let me flip to the right page in my packet. We had a couple of big ticket items, GIS server, that sort of thing last year that were one-time purchases, and so those line items have gone down quite a bit. Our largest thing for this year is we are requesting an additional senior engineer position. As we continue to expand services to Urbandale, we've added programs. We're trying to monitor stormwater facility that are currently out there, things that need to be maintained, encouraging properties to do that maintenance. We've got the CRS program for FEMA. We've got we just keep adding more services as we go. We also have in continued reviews, the review load, as I mentioned, has been rather heavy the last couple of years. So we are asking for another senior engineer position. We do have a current staff engineer. The staff engineer would be a person who has passed their FE, their Fundamentals of Engineering exam, is working towards their PE. And then the senior engineer position would be a licensed PE. So we do have some flexibility there if we can find somebody who's, you know, on the path for an engineering and this would work well for them to step in. We've got a couple of levels there that we can encourage staff to join. But we do feel that given the workload that we have for our engineering reviews, for our in-house CIP designs, we really have more work than our current staff can comfortably handle. We'd really like to maintain our current quality of reviews, which has taken time over the last year, given the quantity of reviews that have come in. So we're hoping to get a little better balance of that with one more position. Well, yeah.
One thing to add too is we currently do have one opening in the senior engineering position. And as Aaron had talked, how difficult it is to fill. Last time we went out, we asked for a staff engineer or a senior engineer. We had 2 applicants and one was not an engineer. So, I mean, we are having a very difficult time. That's why this position, it's maybe more flexible and we may even go to a new title of engineering planner or something, you know, something to look at a different group of candidates possibly. Because as you can imagine right now, the consulting firms are keeping all the engineers busy. So we're having a really hard time recruiting.
For now. That might change soon.
Yeah, we'll see. But again, just wanted to say that is where we do have one opening right now.
And I guess my question was, you know, first of all, congrats on getting through AJ's process to actually get it to our side where get a staff increase piece. Because out of 14 positions, what, 5 made it through?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
but I'm not
senior versus staff, I guess. So why do you need another senior versus just a staff engineer?
Actually, we actually had set up more of the flexibility to be what can we find. Again, we'll probably advertise 3 different positions and see if we can fill the 2 that we, you know, the one we have open and the one that we will have open. So really, it's just the difference with the senior engineers, they're licensed. So there's a lot more things they can do. We do a lot of our own in-house designs, which again, having a licensed engineer definitely helps that out.
Yeah, one of the we've always experienced that. I mean, the engineering field has been extremely competitive since I've been here, and even prior to that, is that, you know, statistically, I think each year, engineering grads from Iowa State, 50% of them leave the state. So automatically, you're below that number of competitive where you can grab them from. And then, as John mentioned, engineering firms out there, and it ebbs and flows. You're right. When times are good, they are picking up everybody they can. And then when times go down, but then it goes back up and we'll have somebody, and we've had it, where they've worked with us a year, 2 years, and a better offer's come along, and so they've moved on. So it just echoes the whole, what Aaron mentioned about the whole competitive nature of attracting qualified individuals and getting them here and keeping them here.
Right. I guess what was most interesting, the one that recently left is actually left for another city. We hadn't actually had that happen before, that they went to another metro city.
we were told that that Metro City had one applicant.
Yep.
And
Ours.
it was ours.
So this is a worst-case scenario, or I guess best case for you guys, is if a qualified licensed PE comes in, that's what it would be hired at. But if it's one of the other, this gives them budgeting flexibility to still hire that if they have to, or if they have the opportunity to, but they could always reduce that, and that would be reflected. So they might spend less than that if they just get a planner or a staff engineer wouldn't be in the same bucket, but I give them the dollars associated with best-case scenario is we get a licensed PE.
Yeah, we're just trying to be creative on how we can possibly fill the position.
And given the quantity of work and subjects that we cover, if we get someone who's not a licensed PE, there's a lot of things that they can still do to take workload off the plates of our senior engineers and balance that. So we really think, we'd love to get another senior engineer, but if we can find another qualified applicant, we can certainly, that would help us a lot.
I'm not really very familiar with the engineering certification. So to go from the senior or staff level certification to the PE, is that what sort of education or
So basically,
do
after.
we pay for that?
Yes, so basically, after you've graduated, you take the fundamentals of engineering, which basically means you're ready to start your engineering career. You need to put in 4 years with working in an engineering system, document your time with the state board, and then you take another 8-hour test. If you pass that, you can become licensed.
And that's the PE?
That's the PE,
Okay.
correct.
So we pay for and provide all of the experiences necessary to move from one to the other?
Correct. If we have one, we've only, we've had one staff engineer that has obtained his license, now one of our supervisors over in the public works side. And now we've had an individual that started off as an inspector that had an engineering degree, has since got his FE, and now we're working with him to get towards his PE license as well.
How many books did you take into your PE exam?
Quite a few. Well, actually, my biggest problem I had is I was in the metric to English timeframe, so I brought my metric books because that's what I was doing. So I had to convert everything from metric to English and work the problems because you were supposed to have the English books that day.
And I guess with this, while you're maybe trying to fill a position, other cities basically outsource most of their engineering services. So they wouldn't even hire the positions, they just outsource it, contract basis. Has there been any to clear the deck, any conversations of doing stuff like that?
With us, I'm not sure that would be a great savings. I think it's different with other ones. When they send it outside, that's kind of, they have somebody do it for the entire city and that's all that happens. For our consistency, I think we would have to be double checking everything and it create extra levels, I guess, of review for us. Because we want to make sure everybody's doing it the same way we do it and we get our public improvements the way we want them. Because ultimately, again, they're the city's responsibility to maintain.
Just with down to staff, I didn't know if there was a period of time where consulting would
We do weigh things. For instance, we've been using consultants more for our larger stormwater projects. We're not doing those in-house. We worked with them on our Aurora projects as part of the reconstruction. We also worked with it, but a consultant did the patching. We kind of worked with them where we wanted to patch. So we are doing some outsourcing of that as well when we can do it. A lot of our other stuff, it's good. A lot of our other patching, it's down to such a system that internally nobody could do it probably as efficient because we do it the same way every year.
I think that's all I had on admin. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
The next and final section is fleet management. If Patrick Halsey, my fleet supervisor's here, he may need to answer some more specific questions that I don't know how to answer.
Internal service, IS 13.
We're still kind of in the infancy of our fleet maintenance program. We've been in our new facility for about 13 months. Prior to that, we had, you know, a shop over at Parks, a small shop over at Public Works. We basically had 2.5 full-time equivalents working on vehicle maintenance. We contracted a lot of maintenance, and we've transformed to a shop that we hope can handle, 99% of what maintenance is performed on city vehicles, and, contracting out a bare minimum of services. And I can say that our shop with our supervisor and 4 mechanics is running very smoothly. Like I say, it's going to take a few years before we perfect what contributions we have from each individual budgets. I imagine we'll have that down in maybe 5 years, but right now we've got a pretty small sample size, so we're constantly adjusting that. The current budget, we do have some issues with that. We project it's going to be about $80,000 over budget. Initially, we were thinking of, we budgeted a mechanics assistant position. We made the decision to go with a full-time equipment mechanic in that position, and that's been a very good move. We took over prior to us moving into our new facility. We did not do any maintenance for fire and EMS. They contracted all that. They performed what they could in-house. Now we're performing all the maintenance on fire and EMS vehicles. So I think they're very happy with our service. We found out that there's a lot of issues with their fire and EMS vehicles. Before they had a problem, they hired somebody to make the repairs. We're kind of diving through each piece of equipment. We're finding a lot of issues, but that should be a short-term thing. They're replacing some of their more high-maintenance vehicles. I think they've got a fire truck up for replacement here. One ladder truck up for replacement right now. So hopefully, we saw a big spike in fire costs this year, fire and EMS, but hopefully that will taper off in the future. In fact, I'm sure it will. So, as far as the proposed budget goes, obviously you will see from the various departments an increase for just overhead in the shop of approximately $30,000, and then we're looking at another. What is the increase for? Pardon me here, I'm going through all my pages and I can't.
Yes, equipment-wise, so if we start shifting more to hybrids and things that way, is there additional shop equipment that's going to be needed to service those?
I'll let Patrick answer that.
As far as hybrids go, no. Those are going to be pretty much your standard equipment set for combustible engines as they are now.
And if we moved more to an electronic fleet?
That'll require additional training to the mechanics, those that are willing to get trained on the electric side. The benefit with some of those electric purchases is that they come with a robust maintenance package tied in with that purchase as well. So when and if something does come up, it goes back to the dealer. It's a double-edged sword though, because then now you're waiting on the dealer to conduct maintenance on a garbage truck or any kind of piece of equipment that you're sending out, and you may need it. We don't have that many backups, if any, on some of that stuff, so.
Okay. And then consistency of vehicles, so if everything was the same model and type, does that help with filters and all of that, type of equipment you need there?
Absolutely, yes, it would.
I didn't really have a whole lot to add on there. I was looking for specifics, what we increased, pulling from other departments for.
It's in the budget summary section, page 14, is both building maintenance and fleet maintenance. Those are internal service funds, just to rehash what that means. They're provided in the document because we do have staff there, but they're not officially part of the budget because it would double count what we submit to the state, right? So each department pays in their share and then they operate like a business. So those are internal services just by definition not counted, because otherwise you'd show the expense there, but the department is showing the expense, right? So they're supposed to operate self-funded, similar to a stormwater utility, but that one is an enterprise fund. It's all a technical thing, right? But because we have people there, I need to show you what those operations are. So we still show it to you as a budget, like any other department. That's why there's a big, long narrative. This is FYI only because there's people there. And they were new initiatives for both of us. But the full picture of what those look like is on page 13 and 14 to show you what the cash balance is. The reflection of what Tim was just talking about is in that cash balance. You can see we're coming into the year for '24 with $32,000 in the bank. So versus building maintenance, which has been around for quite a bit longer, is got almost $1 million in the bank. So it's just a matter of we're just getting started. We didn't really know what we were going to need to spend those first couple of years. So there's a large true-up. The contribution in from the departments is up $237,000 to reflect this is what it actually takes to run the department and pulling in all of the public safety vehicles that we hadn't always done.
Is it some per capita formula that has each department paying in?
I can let you guys talk about the system we use to track it.
What we do, we track everything through software, but what we pull, that $237,000, the increase this year, that's based on our labor on certain equipment. So, we keep track of all the hours we spend on roadway and traffic safety and fire and police. And then everything excluding parts, all that overhead is distributed based on the percentage of hours that we work. And hopefully, we kind of under budgeted for the last couple of years. So we jumped that up $237,000. I assume it should go down next year.
Okay.
We got to build up a little bit of a fund balance there. It doesn't need to be anything like building because they're dealing with big CIP projects, but like I said, we just need to get a little fund balance in there.
But if that fund balance goes negative, it is just an internal fund, so general fund is going to cover.
Yeah, we would transfer funds in to offset it, absolutely. Just like we've had to do occasionally, like in the risk management fund or something when with health claims going up, that one year we used our contingency funds and I transferred money in at the last. We would just have to bring that to council to be able to do those items.
And so if you do build a kingdom of cash there, that doesn't go into the basically unspent balance or the reserves that we have in the general side.
No, this is its own fund, so it carries a balance in order to do those. So it's kind of like equipment replacement, right? Other than I'm not buying the vehicles out of there. Building maintenance, same idea. We pay in over amount of time, so if suddenly you have a transmission go out, maybe you didn't have to pay in directly for that. You've paid in and there's accumulating a balance to offset those operations.
So if we look at, say, 40% of we got a 40% leftover balance, basically, this is not included in that and building maintenance is not included in that.
Correct. It's not part of general fund by any means. It's literally its own fund in the columns. And the offset on the overhead, if you look at the IS 17 specifically for fleet maintenance, building is the same way. It shows how each department is getting charged for each piece. So there's an overhead line, that first line of every one. So for instance, on the police one, you see fleet management fund contribution for overhead is $67,000. That's covering everything except their actual parts that is specifically attributable to them. And then we go down below that and, okay, now here's the overall supplies items, the contracted pieces, the maintenance supplies, and then the non-fuel consumables, so oil and that kind of stuff. Fuel is still charged individually to the department because they go to the fuel pump and they say, this is my VIN number, we know what vehicles those are, and that gets directly charged to them. So no, we don't have a pool attitude, I guess, towards fuel. We want to make sure that we're reflecting what they actually use, so there's a realistic number in there.
Out of curiosity, as we add the hybrids, how much do we expect our fuel consumption to decrease? Do we have any sense of that? I mean,
We don't have any hard numbers on that yet because we don't even know when we'll get those in yet, so we did not factor in anything yet. The first round of them, we've got 9 on order, but I'm not even sure those are going to hit 24 yet. So like what year is that going to come in and then how much actual usage are they? Each department will see their direct benefit from that. So we'll start to gather data as soon as we've got them. So I have no number and there's no number in this budget reflecting it yet.
Okay.
It'll be a present of yay, look, some savings, so.
When the request was made by the police department, I think they did a quick checking with the city of Ames that they used to benchmark that off of. when we have our next break, I'll see if I can hunt that up. Because it was just, I can't even think how it was categorized. It was the payback differential between internal combustion and hybrid, cost per mile. They had an interesting breakdown, but it was kind of mimicking what the city of Ames had done, because it was a like type vehicle for a like type process. So I'll see if I can hunt that up.
I think it was something that paid off in like 6 months. It was pretty quick.
It was a very quick turnaround, yeah. But I can find it real quick. I've had some inquiries, so I've kept that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to find out. I think solid waste is our biggest fuel user. And then roadway maintenance activities, snow removal, things like that. And the police is not far behind. So they're our third biggest user of fuel.
Any other questions on fleet? Okay. The last piece of this section that I wanted to touch on is the road use summary that I handed out to you. So the first three departments that we talked about in this section, roadway maintenance, traffic safety, and street lighting, those are the three that are paid by road use. So this document is effectively a recap of page 6 of your budget summaries. So as we were putting together the numbers, the thing that jumped out at me, if you look across the top of this here, is this is your cash balance that's coming forward, the top section. You don't see it on page 6 because that column isn't on there. But we would go negative in road use based on the current predictions for 24 and 25's budget. So road use is something we don't control whatsoever on the revenue that comes in for that. So all we can control is the expenses that are paid by that. So this was kind of a, we should probably proactively start figuring out why that is. We are not growing road use as fast as we used to. So we used to continue to go up every time we did the special census, you know, those rates go up. So if you look at back, 21, we brought in $6.3 million. Well, last year I only brought in $6.2 million. So this is conservative, obviously, on the revenue side, is I just kept it at the 6.2 for the current year and 6.3, so raising just a little bit, and we're still gonna be negative. So what I went through is to look at, we talked to John Larson and confirming out, all right, so where are some easy gives? What do we have here that we can deal with? The biggest factor of this is general obligation bonds are only using, we're only using general obligation bonds to fund a portion of our street rehab program. So we do that annual street rehab based on the condition of the roads, right? So we've been using road use for anything that's not permanent patching up or a piece that's identifiable, like they're mass doing a road. So the pieces that are in there, you can see in the transfers line, that's effectively 100% of that is preservation projects, the annual concrete street rehab. So the easy give on that will be when we go through CIP next time is to start allocating more of that to general fund. Road use just cannot continue to pay all of that unless it turns around, and I'll be pleasantly surprised. But for the meantime, we don't want to wait for that process. The bottom section is my alternate that I wanted to talk to you about potentially subbing in for this. It doesn't change anything in total as far as we're still doing all of the work. It's just I'm not going to take it out of road use fund. So my things in yellow there, that's the items that are changing from what's up above. The current easy one is the Aurora bike lanes. We put those on hold for a year, and that was to be funded with capital projects interest, which means it was a road project that had excess in the previous year, so it's money left over. So I was already going to fund that at $797,000, so I will just shift those funds because we're going to hold off on that for a while and use that instead to fund this current year, the one that we're in now. So that's in current. So that transfer out will actually go down to $1,450,000 instead of the 2.2 that we have budgeted. In the current budget that we're working through today, they both mentioned that Aurora Avenue Preservation, which is in the CIP, that was also supposed to be $400,000 of road use funds. I will instead use savings from capital projects to do that one as well, to reduce the transfer, and the same in the out year, the 142nd Street overlay for Waterford to the North Corporate Limit. So there's 355. So between those two, that shows you that we'll at least get the balance up to 1.2 million, which is still super low compared to where we normally are for that. But it at least is an easy give, even if general obligation bonds when we go through CIP again, we'll know how much we could shell off from that and still have some additional savings in here. But these are the easy gives that doesn't change anything about levy or anything else. It's all still essential corporate purpose, so I can use excess savings from any project to fund this. It's just whether or not going into the future, we're probably gonna have to start shifting some of that. We'll know a little bit more once we get hopefully to August. We'll have a whole nother year of, or 6 more months of collections, but we're not way over like we have been, and it's kind of hit a plateau, it seems like. There's all kinds of factors that could be going into that, but gas prices, of course, went down again, so hopefully it'll start to pick up a little bit. It's just one we have no control. So those are my recommendations as far as I don't want to not do something and we end up with now 100%, we have to completely shift it over or cover it with the general obligation 100%. I don't think we'll have to be quite that extreme, but at least a portion of it's going to have to shift. And we've known that's been coming. It just suddenly picked up for several years and we were really good on road use, but we've been in this spot before and that's exactly what we did last time. It's just the shift between selling debt to do those projects versus not. Does anybody have questions on that or reaction? Is this revision okay? Yay or nay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will roll those into.
All right. Next on our list was going to be library, and I'm looking to see if we have anybody from the library here. We don't, not
They
yet.
were supposed to be after the lunch break, so we could probably snag any, well, I know.
Economic development?
Haha, you wanted to be done for basketball this afternoon, right?
Okay,
So
economic
how about
development.
you do yours?
Yes.
Come on down.
We
I
could
hear the
fill
Catholic League
anything
starts
that-
today.
Yeah.
I hear the Catholic League starts today. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're undefeated.
Oh.
We're undefeated. Yeah, you're going in as league favorite, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Aaron DeYoung is our Economic Development Director. As you'll know, we made some changes at the beginning of the calendar year based on discussions that I had with Mayor and the Mayor Pro Tem last year during my evaluation as we looked at succession planning and other related issues associated with that. Aaron has joined our staff as the Assistant Director of Economic Development a couple of years ago. Came to us from Colorado where he was the director in the community. And so we were very, very confident and pleased that we had that opportunity to make that adjustment. And our staff, knowing that we would not miss a beat, I'm not on the air, so I apologize. That we would not miss a beat on our economic development efforts. With that, I'll turn it over to Aaron. He can give an overview of the economic development budget and all the wonderful things that he and his vast staff are up to.
And this is CED 3.
I'm sorry.
So Community and Economic Development tab, the first one.
I put you under general government.
Thank you.
Now,
You can put me wherever you want. Yeah, no, thanks AJ for that. I didn't know you were going to go into that. So I do appreciate the confidence in being able to go up into this role for the city. I'm excited to be in it. Yeah, I just want to go through briefly, just kind of the high level for this department, and then, initiatives, what we do, and then moving on to some of the specifics which are in the budget. So, first and foremost, economic development, I mean, we're the business relationship department. And so making sure that, folks that are investing in town have an easy process in getting through that. And so, we like to say that we're the concierges for the business community for this department. So they just call this department and we can shepherd out to everything that we go. And so we rely on our coordination with community development and with engineering, most particularly in getting stuff done. So, so it's certainly the business relationships, so existing business visits, working with the brokerage community and property owners, that's what we do each and every day. And so that occupies a lot of our time. The second part of it is improving that competitiveness for Urbandale in the metro, in the region. And that goes with our marketing efforts, which we do with the Urban Loop, also our quality of life things, which we'll be getting more into, and we're going to be getting into the redevelopment business with Merle Hay Mall and with downtown Urbandale being most focused in that effort. But as the Plum Drive and North Park corridors keep building out, facilitating all of that to improve our quality of life, improve our competitiveness with our neighbors and other states, providing that. So, you know, those are really the two big categories that we work in. And so getting more to the specifics in our budget for this upcoming fiscal year, the big change is to have a new position in there. I like to qualify it as a new position because this department used to be like this in 2016, 17 with a director and with an assistant or a specialist. And then when SK Profit retired and Curtis slipped into the dual role, it kind of changed. And then so we're going back to the norm with this new position. So a specialist too is what we've done. Really, this is the kind of the last piece of the puzzle to free up Curtis to do the assistant city manager role full-time and then work on that strategic government stuff that he's going to be working on. I'm sure there's a better way of describing that, but. Strategic government stuff? Yeah. Strategery, yeah.
When Adam mentioned the kingdom of fund balance.
Kingdom of cash.
Kingdom of
Kingdom of
cash. That's a new
cash.
finance term that we'll incorporate.
I like it better than the slush fund.
So the new position, we really envisioned that, we'll be working with the marketing components, like most particularly helping department, deliver up the UBC that we put in the business record every month. It's an effort. So having extra hands to do that would be great. Certainly maintaining and growing our business relationships, we're going to need two sets of hands to really do a good job in that work. A lot of with the redevelopment business, the interdisciplinary coordination amongst the departments is going to be ever critical. And we've, for Downtown Urbandale, we've set up a team with everybody in each kind of trade to start tackling problems and pursuing opportunities in there. And then coordination with the Economic Development Advisory Board is another key point that we can't do enough of, and having an extra hands will be important. The second part that we'll be working on in this next fiscal year, well now and through the next fiscal year and many fiscal years after that is Downtown Urbandale. So thank you at the end of the year of approving the assistance policy. Already had 10 meetings with property owners. We're starting to stack up the deck of opportunities. So we're going to be starting off with kind of conceptual design efforts with each property owner, because they say, hey, the city's got money, what can we do? So there's ideas generating, but we need to get to more specifics to be able to provide to you, and construction estimates and that type of stuff, so we know what we're investing in for the long haul in that. So really encouraging, and hoped in the next couple months to start bringing you some of that conceptual design work, kind of agreements to go. So exciting on that front. And then certainly, working, one of the other main points in our budget is to have some consultancy money to look at after the comp plan is approved, what public infrastructure should be done and designed, and start the process of construction with the area. I mean, we're probably going to see that there is going to need to be some tweaks in the public environment for Downtown Urbandale, and so we wanted to have some money available to move that forward quickly in the process and get things into the CIP with design and stuff like that. Last thing on my notes I wanted to mention, which I already have, is the partnership team with community development, engineering, parks, finance, making sure that we got all shoulders going in the same direction when there's projects to pop in Downtown Urbandale. So, and that includes what we've been doing with Merle Mall too. So that is my quick dog and pony presentation for our budget. So happy to answer any questions.
I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm going to come off as a serious Debbie Downer on this. And it's not to undercut the work that you guys have been doing at all, but within my household, I get a lot of criticism. And I just say, well, I don't know. It seems like everything is passing us by. All the cool stuff, like, Johnston is getting the Bombers, and West Des Moines is getting everything. And, Grimes is doing amazing stuff with the flyover that we purchased for them. So I guess I figured this was as good of a time as any to express my frustration. And I don't know what it is that we could be doing. I trust that we're doing everything that we can do, but what are we missing? I mean, I get a lot of heat at home, and those are my biggest criticism, my kids and my husband. But I know it's out there, and I think we're getting it, elsewhere too. But every time I read about it, and my world, is focused in Waukee because that's where my kids go to school, and everything's hopping out there. So I don't know. It looks like AJ wants you to talk, Curtis. I don't know. So I mean, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I am, because it's frustrating seeing the stuff pass us by.
I'll tag team with Curtis and with Aaron, and one of the things that, we're aware of that. We have those conversations internally all the time. It's no secret to my staff that I would love to get a brewery in town. And that sounds really terrible of me, but I just, it's just one of those things, because I recall at the, and it doesn't have to be a brewery, so let me qualify that.
How about a distillery?
Either one.
That would be
A gathering place. And when you folks had, I think it was when, I can't remember which cycle of election, but there was a hearing at Giovanetti of Meet the Candidates. And every candidate up there said, we need to have some type of meeting place. And it was like a very large coffee. Was it when you two were up there? Okay.
Yeah.
So it was.
It's every.
So
It is.
Actually,
It
we're
is.
split, by the way.
Okay.
One election.
So, they always talk about, the absence of a meeting place, and it can be a really nice coffee house, which we have Twisted Bean. So if you need to buy coffee, go there. It's a nice paid commercial for them. But at the same time, there's breweries mentioned, and you see those popping up. And I joke with staff about that. But those places of identity, those places of gathering, those places that you can say, we have one of these, whatever that is. And sometimes it's the proverbial flavor of the month. So from the staff perspective, I can assure you that we do take a look at those. I know that, and again, my colleagues are better educated in that realm, but I know there's a lot of moving parts that we can't control. Developers take a look at existing rooftops. They look at where development will grow. They look at how it can, not only in their community, but where it can draw from other communities. Logistically, where are they? The growth in Waukee, I live out in that direction as well, and you see the growth on Hickman Road. But outside of Hickman Road and outside of residential, Waukee's growth in their downtown is really minimal, if nothing. But the rooftops help. Strategic location helps. What developers have relationships with retail outlets helps. So with that, I'll stop. Did I miss anything, gentlemen?
I guess my general sense, when I see like what Waukee's been able to pull off with the new Target stuff and West Des Moines, we just don't have that big. We have some greenfield, but we don't have 640 acres of greenfield. Is that kind of part of the sense that I'm getting of why others are able to do it? We have more smaller parcels. They've got acres.
Yeah, I'll try and provide a little color, and it will sound a little bit like providing excuses. So I'm trying to get through that, but it certainly is opportunities in front of us. If you went and read our current comp plan right now, Urbandale is exactly as that comp plan is described. I mean, it's to be a suburban community with single-family development as the front and have primary employers in our main corridors. And so our zoning is all stacked up for that. So our spots for that, it's for office development. So think of North Park and Plum, like that's the area. And it was designed in the roadways and the infrastructure all to accommodate that. And in our residential areas where are to be, we have lot minimums. There's the densities on our residential real estate doesn't create the population densities to really get some of those things to happen. And it's not zoned for those areas that are on the corners. So those are the excuses. I'm sorry, but that's part of it. And I still have, new eyes for how this was going. And so we have a real opportunity through this comprehensive plan process to reset the expectations for what is in our greenfield, which have incredible access, because access creates opportunities, I've heard. And so, trying to reposition those potential properties for redevelopment is certainly, and we can signal to the market that that's indeed the case. And we also have opportunities in our redevelopment areas to reset the expectation from folks that own their properties and what could be done with those properties. That will take time, but we can start to get some of that cool stuff. You know, Merle Hay Mall, we are in the latest stages of it to be able to get that done, and that will be a real awesome opportunity for the community. And so resetting the stage and talking with the development community to say that we do want more of these things, and we're gonna change the zonings to reflect that comprehensive plan as we get it. That will take time for it to shake out, but that's an important solution to start to change it there. And we aren't building 1,100 houses a year, creating that new densities and moving out west.
So do we have like a big party when we get our comp plan done with all of our developer friends and? I mean, I guess, you know.
Yes, and yeah, when West Des Moines redid their comprehensive plan and went to their big rezoning code, they were at ICREA with the development community, listening to them, showing what the changes were. We will be doing that when that's done. And then it's those relationships over time to build those, to reset expectations, to reset opportunities. Because land is worth what you can do with it. And if we say you can do more with it, things could happen.
Well, I appreciate your comments on that. It's just, I feel, you know, and like I said, it's my biggest fan base is my biggest critics, you know, when they're like, well, why can't we do that? You know, blah, blah. And I, you know, it's just frustrating, but I'm like, we're trying and there's only, you know, so much we can do, but to know that you're always thinking of it. And, you know, we had the situation this year, was it last summer? I don't know, with property on Douglas, you know, that you thought out of the box and brought it to us. And I really, you know, it didn't work out, but the fact that you brought it to us showed me that you're definitely thinking outside of the box, and I appreciate that.
Yep, thank you.
About the comprehensive plan changes, how far out are we where we might start seeing some of those economic development changes occur? Is that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Oh, if it's 5 years, man, we should be faster than that. Yeah, so we're gonna have a new comprehensive plan by the end of this year. I mean, that's probably the out case scenario. So then it's figuring out the rezoning with Steve controlling and figuring all that out and getting it written correctly so that it all works out well. And then it could come out of the gate. I mean, Then you look at the national indicators like, okay, where is inflation? Where is construction costs? Then there's opportunities to happen and things happen when they happen. So, you know, re-signaling to the market that Urbandale is wanting to be different in its areas that can change is half the battle.
Okay.
Quick question, and I may be off base because I'm not in the economic development world, but I've heard that there is a significant skill set difference between redevelopment and development. When it comes to our redevelopment, we have an economics, or do we, with the comp plan and everything, do we have the tools in place? And this isn't a critique or anything. Do we have the tools in place to really do that in a way that would have a lasting impact where, you know, 20 years from now, we could say this is completely new and it's exciting and all these things. Do you feel that we are providing the skills and the bandwidth that you need, or do we need outside consulting? Do we need other things to help us with that at all? I know this is a very big question now, sorry, but it's just, I've heard rumblings that there is a distinct difference in how you approach, and I'm curious if you've thought or need additional tools.
Well, it's certainly, we need to have, the biggest tool is to have a comprehensive plan and a zoning that sings towards what you want it to be. To mention, you mentioned the redevelopment. You know, redevelopment is hard. I mean, you're going back into a place that was built in the 60s before stormwater requirements were even a thing. And so with Merle Hay Mall, we're learning through that is, you know, how can we be creative to achieve the goals of making sure that properties don't flood, but at the same time not squashing the opportunity because throwing an existing development that's already built to have to then provide all the stormwater, just as one example, is hard to do. Just because it was built the way it was built, and to say, okay, but now you need the size of a detention basin, the size of your parking lot on the same parcel, makes it challenging. So we need to get creative in figuring out those solutions, and usually it takes the city to help out more than they normally do in a greenfield development, when you've already set for the environment to go towards what it's zoned to be.
I'm just asking a question, as I think you have a council that's very set with trying to assist you in any way when it comes to redevelopment. And I just don't want you to not be afraid to come to us with suggestions on, we need this type of skill set or these type of things. Because I think I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but I think we're very keen to making sure that this works, and we want to make sure you guys have the resources you need in order to get that done.
And I guess I'd question that a little bit, though. How far are we willing to go on certain things? So if we say, like, pick stormwater Murray Mall, say, you know what, redevelop it all you want, we aren't going to touch your stormwater need. Are we willing to go to that level? If we look at our Class A office building specs, we have a lot of requirements in there for Class A office building specs, or we would say, nope, wipe them away because we want a new building. So I think there is a level, and I think your challenge has always been, what is our level? And I don't think we've had that discussion.
Yeah.
Well, let's have
And
that
maybe a
discussion then.
consultant to help thread the needle, or maybe or extra bandwidth or an extra additional staff or something. Again, we're just trying to figure out how to give you, sorry to take the time. I'm just curious how we thread the needle.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, if I might, I couldn't stay seated. It's, in the transition from economic development to strategic government stuff, still thinking about this, but yes, exactly. No, I did want to mention one of the reasons that we were so enthusiastic about bringing Aaron on is because when I first met Aaron, he was working in the city of Dubuque. And if you remember when Dubuque recruited IBM and redid the Roshek building, et cetera, one of Aaron's skill sets is that redevelopment area. And so when we look at this budget and the request for the economic development specialist, we are starting to see, because part of staff's job is to listen to and pick up the messages that are coming from the council. We understand there's an impatience with downtown. I think we're at the point where we want to see the hockey stick and turn that area into something
The
better.
actual hockey stick?
Oh, sorry, I made a pun and I literally did not mean it. It was not intended. It was not intended.
Well,
thank you. And so what Aaron is first among equals in that downtown team, and really being the coordinator. He's going out, talking to the businesses, talking to the building owners. And so we need to keep that redevelopment effort going on, but we also need the depth of staff to pay attention to all of our primary employers whose employees enjoy those things after work or before work or over the lunch hour, et cetera. So the other thing I wanted to make sure, when we began this effort back in 2013, the first thing the council did was approve an advisory board that the mayor appointed. And now Aaron is working with that advisory board on subcommittees to look at each of our areas, from our competitive policies, which are our incentives, but also competitive policies now have become, what are the cool things that you're offering? Do you have trails that people can access over lunch? Doing 104th Street and those sidewalks, that was a big quality of life improvement for the businesses in that area. So Aaron is now working with the advisory board in each of those strategic areas to move it forward. So approving also that the consulting fees to turn the comp plan from ideas and concepts into actual action is really important as well. So we hear and appreciate the support for this area. And I don't think you'll be shy in asking if there are additional ways that we can get these things moving forward, we certainly will. But a lot of confidence in the direction that things are going here, especially with that redevelopment understanding and background that Aaron's got.
What sort of, in the new employee that you're gonna hire, and this won't be till July? Will you gear that up before July, though, so they'd be able to start then? What's, I mean, is this a recent graduate? What is that person look?
Yeah, it's, you've probably heard this from several other people, but it's tight right now. And so we're identifying that it would be someone recently, the ideal would be recently out of grad school with a planning or an MBA type of position to do it, and then learn the existing business and learn the marketing and learn the tricks of the trade. These aren't tricks. The trade to the strategery and the how to have a government customer service approach to the job. So that's what we're expecting. But it'll be a full blast out to everybody. And maybe we find somebody with a few years' experience that's done it in a rural community or someone else that's wanting to come home. Maybe we'll get lucky in that regard. But we're going to find a rock star.
I know a school to look at for rock stars.
Me too.
Penn State?
No.
Out of curiosity, do we have a residency requirement for those positions? Okay, yeah.
No.
Only you.
Just
Just me.
yours? Okay.
And I'm barely in. Yeah, I kind of mow. Sometimes I mow
Literally
into
your
Grimes
background.
or Clive, so I just send them a bill. But no, the reality, I'm sorry. The reality is that, just in general, Des Moines is a fluid environment. And that's fine, because we want to be able to attract our talent, and our folks live throughout the whole metro area. And I will tell you that in my time here, we've never had a problem with anybody in their distance. They all make accommodations to get here. We have flexible work hours, so, I'll use Nikki for an example. She comes in about 9, but she stays till 6 consistently. That's okay, because not only your distance, but, her family situation, getting your kids off. We do that with everybody else. So everybody has that flexibility, which is good, because I want the talent. Where they live really, for me personally, doesn't really matter. And this whole environment in Des Moines Metro, as you all know, it's fluid. And if you listen to the Des Moines Partnership, it only takes you 20 minutes to get from one point to another. So, but no, we take our talent throughout the whole metro.
I think that's just within Urbandale. It takes 20 minutes to get.
Well, it's 4.6 miles from my house to City Hall. And in the mornings, if I take the wrong route, if I take Douglas, it takes me about 22 to 25 minutes. If I go the northern route, it takes me about 15.
And the fastest you've made it?
The fastest I've made it,
The cherry in his Lexus.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I've ever measured the fastest I've ever gone, so we'll just leave that for a test in the future.
Anything else for economic development?
Library.
We can squeak in marketing in here before lunch, too.
And library's been patiently waiting.
And library, yeah.
I don't
We're a little
like
bit
to
ahead of
wait.
schedule, but I realize that I'm
Where's marketing? Marketing, hold on.
from lunch.
General government?
Okay.
General
the very
government,
last
last page.
Last page. Last page, but
Last but not least.
I was going to say,
35.
page 35 in your program, but number 1 in your heart, right, Derek?
I'd like to think so.
Okay.
So right off the bat, there's no known budget deviations for FY '23. If you look down on the right-hand side, as far as staffing, it's just me. The marketing communications function was added to the budget in FY '18. And when we started, our focus was on recreational programming and economic development. But that's grown and will continue to grow, so we'll keep an eye on that. Oh, so I guess let's look at advertising line 21. You'll see there's an increase which represents our plans to place a page in Urbandale Living every month. I'm sure you've heard it before from residents. They'll say things like, well, I didn't know that the city council was doing this. I didn't know this was happening. And while it, was on our social media channels and on our website, in our newsletters, in our postcards, all of those pieces, we still want to meet residents where they are. And for some reason, regardless of what you think of Urbandale Living, everybody opens it up. It gets sent to every house. So we're going to put a page in Urbandale Living. We'd like to put a page in Urbandale Living that repackages the council recap and the things that you guys are doing at Deus and sharing that with council or sharing that with the residents. That way we can say, we are really trying to meet them wherever they're at. So in addition to all of our other channels, of course, like our website as well.
So that's 21,
That's, 21, you'll see a slight increase there, outreach initiatives. I didn't want to put in Urbandale Living. I don't want them to think that they've got it.
At one point in time, last year, we talked about putting printed copies of some of those communication pieces at the senior center. Did we ever do that?
I'd have to double check, but that's a great idea to keep that, to put that in there.
Just because they're probably less likely to be
on the computer.
on social.
Yeah, certainly.
Since we're talking about Urbandale Living and we're going to spend a lot of money with them, I'd love it if you could continue to talk to them about how Urbandale is also part of Dallas County.
Okay.
And, because they tend to be very Polk County centric.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen them profile
Single Dallas County.
Dallas County teacher. I mean, some of their articles include Dallas County people in them, but
Certainly.
it's not particularly relevant to Dallas County Urbandale, so just plug that in where you can.
For sure. You'll also see in line 23, a slight increase in the professional services line item. I've had great luck in finding and leveraging freelancers to help us do some of the work that we do. So there are pros and cons to using a freelancer. When you can find a good one, they're great, and they have a very niche expertise. And the other pro to that is too, you don't have to take on the cost of hiring a full-time employee. So there's a good balance there. You can't freelance a firefighter or a police officer, but certainly there's creative avenues that you can go for some of these things that we do in communications and marketing. The other one that I always like to call out is our website, annual hosting and support. It goes up just a little bit every year for our contract price. It's about $10,000, but it's arguably one of our most important communication channels. We have plans to refresh the website this coming year. It's clunky. Our focus is going to be on user experience, especially when you're on your mobile phone. So we want to look at retooling the website so that it's convenient on your phone. You can get on, get the information you want, and get off. You should be able to quickly find what you need and move on with your day. So, that's about it at the high level. I just want to make one more comment about the website. We get about 500,000 views per year, 44,000 views per month. So it is one of our most critical tools, and it should be easy to use for our residents.
And you are keeping track of the most commonly clicked areas and
Yes, the most.
trying to bring them to the front.
Yeah, so the most popular page after our homepage, of course, is, believe it or not, spring cleanup. So that is the number, and in 1 year, spring cleanup, which kind of makes sense, it's like a holiday here, followed very closely behind garbage, recycling, and yard waste. So the homepage, number 1, spring cleanup, number 2, garbage, recycling, yard waste, number 3, parks and recreation, number 4.
Okay, so spring cleanup's so popular. Random idea for you. What about a treasure hunt through spring cleanup?
Oh.
I like it. I like it.
Like finding my broken microwave type thing?
Find me a bowling ball, find me a non-working lawnmower, I don't know.
I don't know if we're going to promote scavenging through the community, but
It happens, yeah.
It happens anyway.
Treasure hunt through the spring cleanup.
But do we want to encourage our own residents to be doing that, or? Anyway, that's a different conversation.
Yes.
Eric, you may want to mention the intern.
Oh, we do have an intern coming on to help this summer. So she accepted. Seems really, really great. So I'm really excited to bring her on. She's going to help us with a lot of photography, videography, and graphic design. She's got a really strong background in graphic design. So really excited for her.
What have you found is the best, has the best open rate? Like, what's the from social media perspective? What has been the easiest for people? Videos, is it blogs, is it emails, is it what tends to get the highest? I would say so it depends, of course, but I would say that probably after our website, our most valuable communication tool is the postcard that we send to every household. It comes to your mailbox. You can't miss it. Even if you are just taking it out of your mailbox to then just throw away all of your mail, you're reading it as you're doing that. Most people might put it on their fridge or something, but I'd say behind our website being our most valuable communication tool, it'd be our postcard that we send every other month. They all work together, though, in tandem, so. Any other questions?
At what point do we look at hiring another marketing person? I know Johnston has 2 people who do marketing full-time, and they're a smaller community than we are.
Johnston has 2, Waukees got 2. Certainly, it is something we keep our eye on. As you heard from HR and city manager earlier, there are 14 requests for positions, so I wasn't going to be number 15 to add to that list. I think putting some funds in professional services, leveraging freelancers when we can right now is a good strategy for us. Certainly, though, when we take a step back and we need someone that's a little more integrated with the organization and understands how we work and operate, we are going to have to look at bringing another person on board. So.
Very much so.
So I am an admin on all of those pages, but library and police have a dedicated employee that helps them create content for their pages. Otherwise, though, all the other the channels are me probably behind there typing something up. We have 12 social media channels across the organization, so.
Can you get us a list of all those so we can make sure to follow them all? I don't know if I'm following 12. Yeah,
I can get you a list.
thank you.
So I used to have, for about a year, I ran a splash screen on the front of our website, which got a considerable amount of people. I do that now strategically in the spring, summertime when hits on our website are the highest. I got feedback that the pop-up was annoying, which I get because every time you go to the website, no, I don't want to sign up because you're likely already signed up. But that's one way that we're driving traffic to our newsletter. Across our newsletters, we've got about 15,000 subscribers, depending on what niche topic you're interested in. Not everybody's interested in Parks and Rec or general news or economic development or what it is, but we've got a substantial list and that continues to grow all the time. But we push that in our bi-monthly postcards as well, cross-promoting our newsletters and on our social media too. You can sign up on our website as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Well, lunch is here, so.
You want to take a 5 minutes to grab your lunch or take a half hour to take lunch? Sure.
They're scheduled to be after. Is there somebody coming for yours?
Are you?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
15?
Yeah, we scheduled a 30-minute lunch break. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll start up again at 12:30.